Man, this train is really nice. Glad that I'm in here, not out there. Oh my gosh. I think that our train crashed, dude. What the heck? All my stuff that I brought with me. Man, do you realize how much that suit was? Now I have to wear whatever this garbage is. Whatever. Where even am I? This doesn't look like the frozen tundra that I was supposed to go to. This looks like some kinda evil coliseum. I don't know what happened, but I think I'm gonna have to find my way out of here. But anyways, welcome to Versus. I know that in my last video, I said that we'd be doing Expedition, but it looks like I got derailed from my train, so I think we're just gonna have to go with Versus for now, which released all the way back in August 2001, on the 19th, and something that you'll notice immediately about the logo from the set is that it's in complete Japanese, but I will do my best to try to bridge the gaps in between. But the set feels necessary to complete, as it seems to be sort of the start of the E Series cards, as the borders for a lot of these cards are very different from what we're used to seeing in the base and Neo era. The borders are a nice little yellow, with little lines going off to the left, and a cool Versus logo on the bottom left. This set features 142 cards that were never released out here in the States, which is really unfortunate. Even though we didn't get all the cards in this set, there were just straight up reprints of some previous cards from previous sets, so I will cover those when we get to them. Also, something to note is that the reason that the set never came to the States is supposedly because every Pokemon in this set is a basic Pokemon, which means that even typically having two-stage Pokemon like Crobat were just basics in this set, and the Pokemon Company International assumed that this would probably break the game, so he never got these cards in the States. The cards in this set feature Gym Leaders cards once more, just like Gym Heroes and Gym Challenge, so that's a nice little fun fact. I am super excited to go over this set, and something amazing about this one is that I can do all the artists almost exactly in order for the set numbers, so let's just begin. Atsuko Nishida is one of the first ones to start us off here, illustrating 7 cards for Versus, and they did all of Faulkner's Pokemon, being the Faulkner's Pidgeot, Fearow, Farfetch'd, Dodrio, Togetic, Delibird, and the holographic Faulkner Skarmory. The Pidgeot is gorgeous. The illustration is super unique for a Pokemon like Pidgeot. I feel like in many of the previous iterations of this Pokemon, the lines are typically super thick, but this one has some nice thin lines with the sun peeking out over a mountain, and the Pidgeot stands on what I assume to be the leaves of a tree, looking forward into the distance. I like the pose, I like the lens flare, and starting us off for Versus is a very nice strong card by a very nice strong artist. The Fearow is also quite cool, as it flaps its wings and flies away, and the sea and pointy rocks can be seen in the background. Compared to the Pidgeot, this Fearow is a little bit more intimidating, but it's still dynamic and nice overall. The Farfetch'd is super adorable. It looks like it's going into a building and opening the door with its leek firmly in its mouth. But it's nicely in frame. You can see everything is all close up and close to the ground. I'm happy about this Farfetch'd, which is something I didn't think I'd ever say in a million years. The Dodrio is super cute too. All the different heads have different emotions. The one on the left side is looking concerned at the middle one, which is upset and determined, and the one on the right looks more sad than the other two. It looks like they are on some sort of sand dunes, and I really like the vibe with the transitioning deep night sky. The Togetic is cute too, as it takes up the whole card, smiling and bounding towards the camera, like the effects around it and the clouds below it, along with the nice, super bright blue. I like the soft colors on the Togetic. The Delibird is really cute too. It carries its super large bag and walks along a snowscape, with a village in the background and snow on the roofs. It's a cute card, with the Delibird looking back as it keeps sprinting on. I like the idea of the card too. It seems like the Delibird has just finished delivering presents to the village, which is a very cute idea. And then finally for Nishida, we have the Skarmory Hollow, which is just a gorgeous rendition of the Pokemon. You can see like the speed effects flowing off the back of the Pokemon, with it locking its head down looking below it. I just really like the soft colors that Nishida uses, and really nice white outlines around the hollow, which sort of reminds me of the Neo Discovery Wobbuffet. Overall, if I have this much to say about the first artist in the set, then we're in for a wild ride. Well, it looks like it's time for a new artist. Their name is Kyoko Umemoto, who worked on 6 cards for Versus, representing the gym leader Bugsy, and illustrated the Bugsy's Butterfree, Beedrill, Pinsir, Ledian, and Yanma, as well as the Bugsy's Caesar Hollow. Starting off with the Butterfree, I have to say that the card is gorgeous. I really like how they use a gradient for the actual body of the Butterfree. It's like a textured pattern along it. Along with the super nice colors overall, it's a unique art style that works really well for this Pokemon, as well as the simplistic background with a totally different style to the rest of the Butterfree is really awesome, and I like it quite a bit. The Beedrill is really awesome too. You can see a similar texturing pattern for the outline this time, as well as the inside of the black parts of Beedrill's body. I like the pose that the Pokemon is in, as well as the really bug-like appendages that it has, and the background is cool. It's a relatively basic pattern, but it kinda reminds me of Honeycomb, or something along that line, which is a really good idea to have for what is essentially a king killer bee. The Pinsir is probably the most intimidating version of this Pokemon I think we've ever seen so far, with that texturing style being seen mostly on the horns, but its face is also menacing. It looks as though it's rising from some sort of sandpit, or maybe that's just the perspective. It also looks like it's moving leaves out of the way as it treks forward, which is super cool. And it's a good card of a Pokemon whose cards have not been very remarkable so far, so it is cool. If you remember from my last video, I spoke at length about how much I like the Light Ledian from Neo Destiny, and this card, this Ledian, is just pretty stunning. I like the different forms of stars behind it, as well as the water having stars in it as well. To me, it looks like the Ledian is flying around, landing on some kind of branch. I'm not sure what the bottom left is supposed to be, but I do like this card a lot, and I can see that shading style on its little antennae. The Yanma is really cute as well. I like how it can be seen flying through some sort of unknown area. It looks like there are plant-like holes that it's flying through in the background. Very, very pretty. And you can see the shading effect on its eyes and little feet. Finally, for Umemoto, we can talk about the Bugsy Caesar Holo card, which is like already one of my favorite cards in the entire set, and we're barely 13 cards in out of 142. But I really just like how the colors look on the Caesar looking up into the unknown distance, and I love how kinda small Caesar looks in this card. I like that shading that you can see on its neck and abdomen, and I just adore how this Pokemon is portrayed. And I think I want to buy this card when I can next, because it's just a piece of art that I really like. For some first new cards, Umemoto proves themselves to be a very interesting artist who can make some really pretty cards and cool shading methods. Our next artist is Miki Tanaka, back with some more simplistic but nice looking cards. And the gym leader that they're representing is Whitney. They illustrated 6 cards for verses, being the Whitney's Clefable, Wigglytuff, Persian, Lickitung, Furret, and Miltank. Tanaka was not commissioned to do a holo card for this set, but that's okay, because we have the Whitney's Clefable to talk about. It looks really happy, as it sprawls its whole body out as different colored circles surround it, with a nice little blue background. Very simplistic, but it makes Clefable look pretty cute. The Whitney's Wigglytuff also looks very cute, and it looks even happier than the Clefable, with its beady, bright eyes staring directly into your soul, and the nice little purple background with the bright yellow stars are very effective in showcasing the Pokemon being represented. The Persian is super cute, as it looks towards the camera and as it stretches on a rug, and I think it's my favorite one so far out of all these cards. I just like the pose that it's in a lot. It's cute and it's simple. The Lickitung looks almost upset, but the background is super colorful and nice, which I like quite a bit. And the Lickitung looks very almost compacted, which is unique to say the least. The fur is cute. I like how it's sleeping next to some plants, and I like how almost long its face is, and it's smiling. I just think that it's really cute. It reminds me of the Persian that we just saw. And finally for Tanaka, there's the Miltank, which is very cute, with it sticking out its tongue on a farm, and it's seen just walking around with a simple blue background and nice white clouds. For Tanaka, I'm happy to see them working on more cards with the TCG, and it's nice to see new cards from them in verses. Naoyo Kimura has returned to illustrate 7 cards in verses and represented Morty in the TCG, with the Morty's Ninetales, Gengar, Hypno, Marowak, Noctowl, the Murkrow Hollow, and then the Morty's Misdreavus. To say these cards are gorgeous would be the biggest understatement of the century. The Morty's Ninetales is literally awesome. Its tails coil around it and move in all different directions, and it's snarling with some cool bamboo and fire surrounding it. The Morty's Gengar does have its tongue way out, like way out. You can see it poking almost through the card, which is a little bit concerning. But other than that, the beautiful orange and deep purple sky along with the moon in the background with some dead trees in the background as well makes for a gorgeous Gengar card that's iconic and one that I've been able to hold in the past before. And the card does definitely feel better in person. The Morty's Hypno is absolutely amazing. The pose that it's in, reaching for something, with light radiating off of both of its pendulum and its fingertip, is amazing, and the wooden bamboo-like flooring really adds to the card, and it's just a wonderful rendition of a weird Gen 1 Pokemon. The Morty's Marowak is yet another striking card by Kimura, with a bunch of Ghastlies flying around in the background, with the same purple and orange colors in the back. But instead of the moon, there are some big stone pillars around the Marowak, which has the camera looking up from below, which is an amazing shot that really accentuates the Marowak to looking awesome and dynamic all at the same time. The Noctowl continues the trend of having the moon in the background, with a deep purple sky, but the wings of the Noctowl spread to break the trees in the background apart as they curve around it. And like I said, the moon can also be seen in the background of this card, and the pose that Noctowl is in is menacing and unique. The holofoil on the Murkrow card is really cool, as there is orange that bleeds around the side of it, and the pose that it's in make it look almost genuinely frightening. The Mischievous is cute too, as it looks back with a nice little tree in the background, with clouds obscuring the moon in the background as well. And yet again, this is a cool rendition of a not super remarkable Pokemon typically. So overall, Kimura has made some absolutely gorgeous cards for verses that we will most likely never see here in our English language. Our next artist that we're moving on to is Yukiko Baba, who worked on 6 cards for the set, and the gym leader that they were assigned is the gym leader Jasmine. And the cards that they worked on are the Jasmine's Raichu, Magneton, Electabuzz, Jolteon, Ampharos, and the Jasmine's Steelix holographic card. Baba's style is really interesting. It's simplistic, kind of like Tanaka's, but it's also got some interesting and semi-detailed backgrounds. The Raichu is cute, very round, and I like the color contrast from the yellow to the green around it, as well as its tail. And then the Magneton looks in all directions, as waves of either sound or electricity go all around it, and the little Magneton is surrounded by a little black void, which is simplistic and effective. The Electabuzz is near some electrical cables, and it looks ready to battle, as electricity clashes around it. The Jolteon is actually quite adorable. I feel like Baba's style works really well with spiky Pokemon like Jolteon. The Ampharos is also really cute, and I like the moon illuminating the tail on the back, as well as the nice simple clouds in the background, which makes me just like this one quite a bit. Then, the Jasmine Steelix Hollow is very nice, with its super simplistic and bold lines. Overall, Baba's simplistic style works well for verses, but that means that there isn't a lot to talk about for Baba, which is not a bad thing at all. Masako Yamashita illustrated 6 cards for verses, and the gym leader that they represented was Chuck. The cards that they illustrated are the Chuck's Primeape, Poliwrath, Rhydon, Tauros, Granbull, and the Chuck's Donphan. The Primeape is in a pretty dynamic pose, and it's in the middle of kicking. The effects from the foot make you very clearly able to tell that the kick has some impact behind it, and the lines in the background give you the idea that the Primeape is going rather quick as it jumps and kicks. The Poliwrath grabs a boulder in the middle of some sort of rather little pond, as lush grass grows behind it. The Poliwrath looks very upset as it holds the boulder, as water ripples around it. The Rhydon is also pretty cool. I like how it's standing on a plain grass field, and it's looking back at the camera as its tail swings forward, and it looks like it just finished going through some action, with a nice little lush forest in the background. The Tauros is quite dynamic. Not only is the background varied and interesting, as it bends around the Tauros, but also the pose that the Tauros is in is quite dynamic, as it has 2 of its hooves up and as it looks backwards, as the tail swings in different directions. The Granbull is very striking, as it raises up its fists looking vicious as fire blazes in the background, which is even funnier when you consider that nowadays, Granbull is a fairy-type Pokemon. The Donphan is the final card that Yamashita did in Versus, and it's a pretty nice one. I like the dust effect that's behind the Donphan, as well as the pose that it's in. The desert behind it is also quite striking, so overall, Yamashita made some pretty cool looking cards for Versus, and I'm excited to see more from them. It's nice to see Mitsuhiro Arita return for Versus, and they made some gorgeous cards, as always. Arita worked on 7 cards for Versus, and the gym leader that they were assigned was Price. Arita worked on the Price's Dugong, Cloyster, Lapras, Articuno, Sneasel Hollow, Piloswine, and the Price's Delibird. The Dugong is definitely my favorite rendition of this Pokemon so far. Just seeing it going under the water with its cute eyes is really cool. I like it whipping its tail behind it and seeing how dynamic its body is portrayed on this card. The Cloyster is cool too. With the shading that Arita did for it, you can really tell the whole circle of Cloyster looking down at you, which I really like. And the awesome water effect that Arita used for this card, which is a bright green water. The Lapras is quite cool too. I like how it's splashing the water around it while it looks forward as a nice beach and wonderful trees are behind it. Overall, A very nice card by Arita. The Articuno is beautiful too. I like how the background is sort of muted, but the Articuno is spewing some sort of hail towards the camera as it spreads its wings way out, which is very striking. The Price of Sneasel Hollow is really cool. I like how Sneasel is looking back at the camera as it climbs up a tree, looking like it's scavenging through some sort of nest. It makes Sneasel look a little scary, but also very intriguing. The Piloswine is a rendition of the Pokemon that we haven't really seen before, with it flaring up all of its fur looking like it's being pushed back in battle, as grass blades swish around it and fly up into the air. And then there's a Delibird, which looks onto the distance as it holds up its bag behind it, looking forward, looking off the face of a cliff, which is a very unique situation for the Pokemon like Delibird to be in. Overall, Arita worked on some gorgeous cards for Versus, and I'm always happy to see his name credited in a set. And another artist that's nice to see credited in his set is Shinichi Yoshida, who worked on the set. And the gym leader that they portrayed was Claire. Yoshida worked on 7 cards in Versus: the Claire's Blastoise, Jinx, Gyarados, Dragonite, Politoed, Mantine, and the Claire's Kingdra. Starting with the Blastoise, this card is really interesting, as the shading style is pretty typical of Yoshida in this era, but the pose is also really cool. As you can see, Blastoise is full cannon as it faces outwards, and its hand looks like it's trying to grasp at something, with nice craggy cliffs in the background. Blastoise looks determined and ready for battle. The Jinx is quite goofy, as it holds its hand up standing inside of some sort of house, with the moon raised high into the background, and it looks like it's just been found out by some sort of light. The Gyarados is in a very action-heavy pose, as it strikes towards whoever aggravated it, and you can tell it's in action because the trees in the background are blurry because of how fast the Gyarados is going. The Dragonite is quite the beauty, as it flies right below the clouds as the sun is behind it, and the pose that it's in is quite pleasing to look at, just as the shading is, with its tail swinging behind it. The Politoed is a weird one. I like the shading on it. I'm a little confused why he's in the middle of nowhere, but the background is pretty well done. And the Mantine is quite beautiful. As it curves to the background, the top of the water can be seen twisting just as the Mantine does in a circle. And the shading really ties this one all together. Finally, Yoshida worked on the Claire's Kingdra, which looks upwards as it hovers over in the ocean still, with some rocks behind it. I like the top of the card is brighter than the bottom, and the use of colors and shading are what make this card what it are. The more I see Yoshida's cards, the more I notice the distinctive gritty shading style, and I think it's a good reason as to why it's so easy to tell when I see their cards. Now I can talk about an artist who's only received 1 card in a previous set, being Etsuya Hattori, who worked on the Sun Current for Neo Destiny. But in this one, Hattori worked on 2 cards, and was assigned Lieutenant Surge, working on Lieutenant Surge's Raichu, as well as the Lieutenant Surge's Lantern. For only being their second and third cards, these ones are actually quite nice. I like how the Raichu looks to be deflecting some sort of attack, or shooting some sort of electricity out of its tail like a beam. The heavy shading on the card as well as the simple, liney background make the card look very, very striking. Same can be said with the lantern. The colors are a bit striking, but the lighter and white blue towards the top left, along with the darker blue towards the bottom right, with the lantern illuminating the area around it is really, really nice. And I like these 2 cards by Hattori a lot, but unfortunately, these are the last 2 cards that Hattori ever worked on for the TCG. But hey, if you wanted to collect all the cards by them, it wouldn't run you back too much money, so that's good at least. Anyways, it's sad to see an artist with the clear talent stop working on the Pokemon TCG. Now, we can move on to a new artist as well, Asuka Iwashita, who worked on 2 cards for Versus, and were assigned to work on Sabrina, being the Sabrina's Xatu and the Sabrina's Espeon. The Xatu is really cool. One of them flies in front of the sun, broadcasting a little light with stars and other objects inside of it, and another Xatu on the right who looks to be posing in front of some sort of psychic energy. Now that I look a little harder at the card, it almost looks like Xatu is projecting an image of itself on the sun, which would make the card even cooler. The other card that Iwashita worked on was the Sabrina's Espeon, which is a little confusing to look at. I mean, I like the colors that they use for Espeon, and those colors are ones that I don't think we'll ever see on this Pokemon ever again. But it holds some sort of cloth in its mouth, and there's many, many colors in the background that go from dark to light on the far right. Very striking, if not a little confusing. But for Iwashita's first 2 cards, these are quite cool, honestly. Now, we can move on to another new artist, Satoshi Ota, who was commissioned to work on 2 Misty cards, being the Misty's Lapras and the Misty's Quagsire. The Misty's Lapras bends the water around it, with its neck curving to the left, and the waves crashing and splashing around it. Then there's the Quagsire, which is just adorable. It swims above a large area of water, with its mouth open and smiling, and I assume that it's looking at its own shadow. Either way, it's just really cute, and I like the color that Oda used for the water. The deep orange looks really good here. For first cards, Oda did a really good job portraying these water-type Pokemon. Now, we can talk about another new artist, being Motofumi Fujiwara, who worked on two cards for Versus, and represented Erica, with the Erica's Blossom and the Erica's Jumpluff. The Blossom is really cute. I like the use of colors for the background, as well as the little smile that Blossom has on its face. And petals fly all around it. It's very intricate and purposeful. And then there's the Jumpluff, which is also quite cute, with a bunch of little pollen or white particles flying around it, as it smiles and looks forward, with a bunch of grass behind it and a tree faintly being seen on the left. Again, like I said for the other artists, for first cards, these are really good. And another returning artist, one that's always fun to talk about, Tomokazu Kamiya returns to create a couple cards for Janine, as he worked on 7 cards for the set, being the Janine's Beedrill, Arbok, Venomoth, Weezing, Ariados, Crobat, and the Janine Shuckle. I love the colors used in the Beedrill, with the blood red sky and the quick action of seeing Beedrill Stinger flying towards the side. And the trees warping in the background is really awesome. The Arbok is really cool too, as it can be seen coiling around a tree in preparation to strike. And I like the leaves visible on the tree in the background. And then there's the Venomoth, which looks extremely angry as it shoots out some sort of little deadly balls towards the camera. The Janine's Weezing looks super concerned as it shoots poison gas into the vents around it, in what I assume is it spreading its deadly gas around. The Ariados looks really cool as it spins its web and swoops down towards the ground, with the trees connecting in the background. The Crobat is really cool as well. I like how they're in a cave coming towards the camera. They look pretty upset as a crowd of Crobats come towards us. Then, finally, the Janine's Shuckle, which is super cute, as it's trying to pull a boulder back to free itself from a cave, or he's trying to block the cave off. Either way, the Shuckle is really stressing out, and Kamiya has illustrated some really nice cards for this set. Some of my personal favorites. Kei Hoshiba returns to illustrate one card for Versus, representing Brock with the Brock Amistar, which has an interesting blue background, and Amistar looks interesting with a 3D render, almost a little scary, honestly. Overall, Hoshiba's current card is kind of weird in comparison to everything else in Versus. But Katsura Tabata also returns from Neogenesis to work on Brock's Kabutops, which primes its scythe with an orangey yellow red in the background, which is certainly interesting. I mean, the fact that they only got one card in the set says a little, but Tabata will continue to work on the cards in the future, so we'll see more of them later. Another artist who returns is Kimiya Masago, who, before, I enjoyed for their realistic work, and they illustrated cards for Blaine's Pokemon, being the Blaine's Typhlosion and the Blaine's Macargo. And these cards I like quite a lot as well. The Typhlosion has a blazing inferno around it and it looks very upset. The Magcargo looks really derpy as it smiles and looks up, but it shoots out a bunch of lava, which is honestly kind of terrifying. Masako is a talented artist whose cards are very unique and scarily realistic for this time. Good to see Kagemaru Himeno back for a few more cards, representing Will, being the Will Slowbro, Executor, Jinx, Xatu, Espeon, Slowking, and the Will's Girafarig, being 7 total cards. The Slowbro is quite cool. There are waves in the background, and they are transparent as the Slowbro winks towards the camera. Even the little thing on its tail looks back towards the right side, and there are lines indicating speed at the top. Really cool Slowbro card overall. The Executor is quite cool as well, with a very intricate background and the lines coming towards the front, and the Executor's head in the middle looks quite sad and edgy. The Jinx is quite cute, as it also winks towards the camera, shooting a heart out as more lines go towards the camera. The Xantu has got to be one of my favorite cards in the whole set. There's a bunch of writing in the background and some random symbols, but the Xatu itself is really cool looking, with the wings flapping in different directions, and it looks straight towards the camera. And then there's the Espeon, a super complicated background with lines and other elements surrounding this floating Espeon, which looks mighty and majestic as it looks upwards. The Slowking is looking back at the camera, with more lines going towards the middle. And I somehow feel like for some reason that a lot of these cards are supposed to connect with all the lines and such, 'cause You have the Will's Giraffe rig, which illuminates the area with its tail, and lightning can be seen in the background. But the lines flow outwards from the giraffe rig. But I might be crazy. Anyways, Himeno's work on this set is all amazing, and I love all these awesome cards. Toshino Aokyu has returned to work on two cards for Versus, being the Koga's Crobat and the Koga's Fortress. The Koga's Crobat is really cool. I like the shadow that covers its face with its own arm, and the dotted red, yellow, and pink background is really cool. I like how upset it looks. The Fortress is also quite cute. I like the dots in the background as well as how big the Fortress is on this card. Big fan of this one, overall. Even though they only did two cards in this set, Aoki has made some cute cards that are a big part of the set. Next is Yukamori, who worked on 6 cards for the set, and he represented the Elite Four member Bruno, being the Bruno's Machamp, Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, Steelix Hollow, Ursaring, and the Bruno's Hitmontop. The Machamp looks really upset as it primes its fist for battle. Then there's the Hitmonlee, which kicks around, and the Hitmonchan has its fist primes for battle as well. Then there's the Steelix, which slithers across the floor. The Ursaring is very small, which is cute, and the Hitmontop is flying around with its head on the ground. I like the artworks of the Pokemon that Mori did in this set, but the backgrounds are all the same, which isn't bad, but it just means that there's not a lot to talk about. Our next artist is a brand new one, Hajime Kusajima, who worked on 6 cards for the set, being Karen's Rapidash, Magmar, Flareon, Tyranitar, Umbreon, and Karen's Houndoom. All of these cards are really gorgeous. The Rapidash is bounding forward with lines of speed going behind it. The Magmar looks a little spooky as it sits on a bench, but it's an interesting setting for a fire Pokemon. The Flareon looks really awesome, with fire surrounding it as the camera looks down onto it. The Tyranitar is really cool, as it looks back at the camera with its tail swung behind it and a black and red cave being in the background, with some nice shading on the Pokemon. The Karen's Umbreon Hollow is absolutely beautiful. Not having a background isn't actually a bad thing when a card looks like this. The shading and the glow effect is perfect, mixed with the sleepy Umbreon is just awesome, as well as being a super cute card overall. Then there's the Karen's Houndoom, which is just majestic, with clouds in the background and a cliffside that the Pokemon is standing on with a dead tree in the background. I like how the head of the Houndoom lines up with the sun in the background, and I think it's really gorgeous. For first cards, giving Kusajima so many awesome Pokemon cards was a phenomenal decision. Our next artist is one I've spoken about in length in our last video, being Hironobu Yoshida, who is in charge of some of the Team Rocket's Pokemon, being the Wobbuffet, Raikou, Entei, and the Rocket Suicune. All of these cards are beautiful holographic cards. The Wobbuffet is really cool because it's in its iconic pose with its arm above its head, while it's taking up the entire card, which is quite cool. The Raikou is super awesome as it dives towards the camera with its claws ready to tear you to shreds. And the background shadow kind of looks like a person's face, which is kind of cool. The Entei is gorgeous, and I like how it looks to the right, as you can see most of its body just regally looking over. Then finally, the Rocket Suicune bounds forwards as it looks up and to the left, as the ribbons flow behind it, with a cool red vortex going behind it. Something to note about these cards is that they're all holo cards, which is fitting for an artist like Hironobu. Our next artist is one whose praises I've sung in the past of it, who is Aya Kusube, who gets to work on the Champions Pokemon, being Lance's Charizard, Gyarados, Aerodactyl, Dragonite, Ampharos, and Lance's Kingdra. A total of 6 cards for Kusube in this set. I really like the Charizard that Kusube did. It looks scrunched up and really cool with its flaming tail. And like other Kusube cards, the colors and shading are phenomenal, just like on the Gyarados, who you can see the entirety of in the card, which is really cool. And I like how spiky and fish-like he made Gyarados in this card. The Aerodactyl is awesome too, with it being fully visible in the card besides its little wings, but I like how aggressive it looks overall, with its spiked tail. And then there's the goofy and cute Dragonite, who looks very curious, but also silly with that distinctive cool shading style. And the same can be said with the Ampharos, who looks silly but also very well drawn, with a big smile on its face and its tail in the background illuminating the area around it. Finally, we have the Lance's Kingdra, which is awesome. It looks so slender and majestic, with a little bit of light bright blue surrounding it on the edges of the card, but mostly black can be seen. The simplistic colors mixed with the masterful shading are a good reason as to why I like Kusube's cards, and they are a very talented artist. Technically illustrating the most cards in this set, Big Mama Tagawa returns for a bunch of the same cards, which are all just TM01s and TM02s for all the gym leaders. So I'll show a little sideshow of a few of them right here. This also includes the Elite Four and Team Rocket as well, so they are a little bit more interesting, but only just a little bit. They are just trainer cards after all, for all the TMs, which is not the most interesting idea, but seems necessary for a set like Versus. And next, we can move on to the reprints, which are the Potion from base set by Keiji Kinabuchi, the Moo Moo Milk from Neo Genesis by Tomokazu Kamiya, the Full Heal from base set by Kinabuchi, Switch from base set by Kinabuchi, Warp Point from Gym Challenge by Kinabuchi, Super Scoop Up from Neo Genesis by Kinabuchi, Energy Flow from Gym Heroes by Kinabuchi, Energy Charge from Neo Genesis by Kinabuchi, Energy Arc from Neo Discovery by Tagawa, and the Master Ball from Gym Challenge by Kinabuchi. There are also actually a few new trainers from Versus, being the Pokemon Reversal, illustrated by Tagawa again, which features Weepinbell and Geodude being grabbed up and switched out. Blastoise and Electabuzz can also be seen just chilling in the back. And the other new card in this set is the Energy Restore by Hideyuki Nakajima, who is also a new artist. And this is their first card, which is cool. There are energies rising up from the water, which makes this card a pretty interesting little trainer card. There is also a secret rare in this set, being the Rocket's Tyranitar, illustrated by Hiromichi Sugiyama, which is really cool. I don't know who that Team Rocket guy on the side is, but I really like how Tyranitar looks in this card. He looks super menacing and neat. Very spiky all around, but I really like the secret rare card. I'm sure pulling this card back in the day would have been the craziest feat imaginable. And that was Versus. What a really cool set. I love how they brought new artists onto the TCG with their neat debut cards, and also gave all those old artists some cool Pokemon to flex their abilities on. I like all the gym leaders Pokemon, and how different artists receive different gym leaders or Elite Four members, and even the champion. I like a lot of stuff about this set, but let me just talk about my favorite cards from the set, being the Bugsy Caesar, Morty's Hypno, Jasmine's Jolteon, Price's Dugong, Lieutenant Surge's Raichu, Misty's Quagsire, Janine's Arbok, Will's Xatu and his Espeon, Karen's Tyranitar, Rocket's Entei, and Lance's Dragonite. This set was really awesome to cover, and I love all the artists who worked on it. It's just a shame that we were never able to receive this set in the West, as I would have loved to master this set a lot. Anyways, I've got to find my way back to the train because this is terrible overall. I mean, seriously, I just can't believe I lost my suit. Anyways, I'll find my way out of here, and I'll see y'all in the next set, being the actual expedition set. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm happy to have found this train station. Finally, I can get back on track to where I was trying to go. Let's see here. Alright, let's get on this train. So, back on the train. I really don't know how I feel about this since the last one went so terribly, but hopefully this one goes just fine. Well, I might as well give y'all an intro to this set while we're here on the train waiting. Hello all, welcome to Expedition. This set released September 15th in 2002, so it looks like we're already taking on a new year here. So congrats to Pokemon for holding it down for 3 years already in English, with so many awesome sets that were able to be talked about. This set is the introduction to the E Series type of cards, which were cards with the intention of being able to be scanned into the actual Pokemon games with a device called the e-reader. As such, these cards feature these really awesome yellow borders with a large part of the left slot being taken up by lines and the E-Series logo in the bottom left, making cards from this era instantly recognizable. This set was also the first to widely use the reverse holo effect, which let almost all cards in the set being able to be used as reverse holo cards, where the holographic part of the card covers the whole card, instead of just inside the little box. This set is also extremely hard to find, much like these other sets, but we're moving into sets that are also super duper hard to find.
You've arrived at your destination.
Ah, wonderful. Now we can go out of this train. Brr, it's freezing here. Oh my, I can't wear clothes like this. Hold on. Uh, I got something in my backpack here. I think I've got like a vest or something. Um, Okay, yeah, this is it. Okay, perfect, perfect. We'll wear this instead, so I'm not freezing on this trip. Oh, the frozen tundra. What a sight to behold. While I'm starting my trek through the tundra to get to the underwater city, let's talk about some of the artists in Expedition. First, we'll start off with Milky Isobe, who worked on two cards for Expedition, being reprints of the Metal Energy and Darkness Energy. These cards are the same as they were in Neo Genesis, but the Metal Energy is no longer a holographic card. For reprints, I want to cover them a little shorter, because this video will be long enough on its own. But these energies are a staple, so good job on Isobe. Moving on to a new artist, Kai Ishikawa, who worked on the Energy Search Trainer card. Just being this one card, which is cool, I suppose. It looks like a fire energy is floating in front of a bunch of gray tanks. We'll see this card more as the sets go onwards, but this card is fine, and it shows how an energy search would probably look. Next, we move on to Hideyuki Nakajima, who worked on the Energy Restore for Expedition, which is just a straight reprint from the one from Versus. The card shows energies floating above some water, and we will see this card more as the sets go on. And now, we'll move on to Big Mama Tagawa, who worked on three cards for Expedition, being the Dual Ball, which appears to be two Pokeballs flying in different directions, with a pink, blue, and yellow background, the Multi-Technical Machine, which is reminiscent of the TMs from Versus, but the card is a rainbow box with a little antenna hanging off of it. And then there's the Pokemon Reversal, which is yet another reprint from Versus, showing the Weepinbell Bell and Geodude, with Blastoise and Electabuzz in the background. Tagawa's style is something that I've never been able to actually pin down, but the way they do trainers can either be super interesting and fleshed out or just boxes with colors like the TM cards. Overall, these trainers serve their purpose quite well. Our next artist is one who received a whopping 15 cards in the set, being Keiji Kinabuchi. It's nice to see their name again, and it's nice to see them working on 15 cards for this enormous set. Kinabuchi worked on the 6 default energies that he worked on for the other sets, but this time, their borders have that same E Series effect that the other cards in the set do, which is something of note for sure. Kinabuchi worked on the energy removal too, which shows energies floating around a swirling vortex with purple energy flowing towards the camera. The Master Ball is a straight reprint of the one from Gym Challenge. The Power Charge is almost a straight reprint of the Energy Charge, but the effect of the card is different, which is of note. The artwork is the same on this one though. The Strength Charm is a new card for Kinabuchi, which shows the crystallized charm laying down on the rocky ground, with the full charm being able to be seen in the card, which is neat. I like the simplicity in this card. The Super Scoop Up is a straight reprint from Neo Genesis, and the Warp Point is a reprint from Gym Challenge. The Potion is a reprint from Base, but this one has a different artwork, featuring a different potion, and the Switch is a reprint from Base with a different artwork, showcasing Porygon 2 in this card. And then there's the Full Heal, which is also a reprint from Base, with a different artwork, showcasing the new Full Heal with a heartbeat in the background, which is a neat touch. Overall, Kinabuchi's cards in Expedition are simple reprints for the most part, but I like the Porygon 2 and the Switch card, if you couldn't tell by me pointing it out when I was speaking about the card itself. Our next artist is Ken Sugimori, who returns to create just some trainers for Expedition, which is actually a nice change of pace, as these trainer cards are quite awesome. Sugimori worked on 6 cards for Expedition. The Bill's Maintenance, which shows Bill working on some machinery with a screwdriver, the Copycat, which showcases a girl dressing up like other prominent figures such as Team Rocket or Pikachu, the Mary's Impulse, which shows Mary and someone else being excited about something, while the people in the background are freaking out, the Pokemon Nurse, which shows a super cute Wooper looking back curiously at its damaged tail that's wrapped in bandages, with a nurse overlooking the Wooper's wound. The Professor Elm's training method, which shows Professor Elm being bitten by Totodile as Chikorita and Cyndaquil watch Elm be attacked, and the Professor Oak's research, which shows Oak being surrounded by many books as he, researches something. I think my favorite out of the lot is probably the Pokemon Nurse. It's just really cute, and I like that aspect of cards. Overall, Sugimori's trainer cards are actually quite amazing. They showcase how the people and the Pokemon would interact with their environment very effectively. Now that we've covered all the trainers, I think I'm going to have to enter this icy cave, as it doesn't look like I can get much further without exploring it. So let me have a look. In the meantime, we can talk about Ayami Tomita, a new artist in Expedition who worked on one of the Total Dial cards, being 135. This one is super cute. It looks like it's resting on a wave, or resting on a boat, as bubbles flow in the background. Very nice for a new artist. Alright, looks like I'm in the ice cave now. It's pretty dark. Hold on. Let me light a torch really quickly, and then we'll delve deeper into this cave. Okay, looks like we can see better in this cave, and as we explore, we'll talk about some of the other artists in the set. Hironobu Yoshida is not a new name at all, but it's one that we've heard many times in the past. But they were able to work on one card for Expedition, being the Meowth, which is pretty cute, as its shadow can be seen cast on the wall in the background. It looks angrily back at the right side of the camera, and a coin can be seen being thrown into the foreground. Happy to see Hironobu working on a card for this set, even if it is just one. Satoshi Ota returns from Versus to deliver one card to us, being the Meryl, which is pretty darn cute. I like how it's smiling as it sits on a rock next to a stream, and there's also a branch in the foreground. It's just nice to see a landscape for Meryl to be chilling in, so I quite like it a bit. And for Ota's third card, it's a nice common card in Expedition. Our next artist is Toshino Aoki, who worked on two cards for Expedition, being the Hoppip, which flies in a field with those cool speed effects flying from behind it, and then the Quillfish looks derpily as it hangs out in some nice teal water as bubbles fly around it. It's nice to see Aoki's simple style continue in Expedition, so happy to see them back. Motofumi Fujiwara has returned from Versus to illustrate one card in Expedition, being one of the Chikorita cards, number 100, which is a cute rendition of the Pokemon. I like how its legs are all sprawled out as it looks towards the camera, and the grass around it is very nice and visible, with a nice blue sky. I like the simplistic shading too. It makes Chikorita pretty shiny. Fujiwara's third card is quite nice, so that's good that I have nothing bad to say about it. Our next artist only has two cards in this set, is a new artist, and these are the only cards they've ever illustrated for the TCG, being Sachi Matoba, who illustrated the Bulbasaur number 94, which is one of the best renditions of Bulbasaur I think we've ever seen before, with it laying down, smiling on the floor as flowers blossom around it. And the other card that Matoba illustrated was a Cyndaquil number 104 for this set, which I actually do personally own. Its colors are really beautiful. I like the simplistic flames on Cyndaquil, but the detailed, almost painting-like background of the card. It's really awesome. Too bad Matoba will not return for any other sets in the future. Cool cards for a cool set, though. Another artist returning from Versus is Asuka Iwashita, who illustrated the Quilava for Expedition, which is a really interesting rendition of this Pokemon, as it blows up a rock with the flames in its butt, and you can see rocks flying everywhere, as Quilava lays down on the floor. I like how dynamic it is, and Iwashita's cards continue to be interesting, so I hope to see more of them. And again, yet another artist who had their time to shine in Expedition and didn't receive any more cards after this, being Yuichi Sawayama, who illustrated four cards for Expedition, being the Gloom, which can be seen drooling an enormous bubble, as a cool viney background can be seen behind it, with a green to pink gradient splash in the back. Then the Metapod looks like the shell of a Metapod, with lines connecting the different blocks of the Metapod, which is one of the most interesting cards I've ever seen before. Then there's the Charmander number 98, which lights the area around it on fire, with smoke coming up from the sides, and the moon can be seen in the background. Then the Tauros shoots fire off of its mouth and rushes towards the camera, and red and blue can be seen in the background colors that link the Tauros to the front of the card. For first cards and final cards, Sawayama created some of the most interesting common and uncommon cards for the whole set, so that's absolutely something to be taking note of. Another new artist was introduced in Expedition, being Hiroaki Ito, who worked on two cards for the set, being the Electabuzz, which holds an electrical wire in its hands as it's surrounded by blue electricity, as the background shows other wires and pipes and smoke. Then, one of the strangest cards I think I've seen ever, being the Typhlosion number 64, which shows Typhlosion straight on as it looks towards the camera, which is one of the most interesting viewings of a Pokemon that I think I've ever seen in my entire life, but you can see the flames around it and the lines of reddish yellow as the background of white. Ito made a strong impression in Expedition, and we won't see them for a while, so wait to see what they're cooking in the future. I think I made it out of that cave finally. I swear, when you're talking, time can fly by so fast. So this is it then, the Mountain of Hollow. That's pretty convenient actually, as we're going to be looking at all the artists who have holographic cards in the set. So thank you, Mountain. Anyways, we're going to be scaling this mountain while we talk. So let's start with Shinichi Yoshikawa, who worked on two cards for Expedition, being the Venusaur Hollow, which can be seen walking through a forest and prancing along. I need to find a Venusaur card that actually tries to make it look cute. And then there's the non-hollow version of the Hollow Venusaur. These two cards are 3D generated, and you can totally tell. But the artist who did these cards also worked on the Dark Crobat from Neo Destiny a while ago, which is definitely neat, I guess. I mean, I think I prefer the Dark Crobat because this Venusaur is kind of scary. Our next artist will be Kei Hoshiba, who worked on the Typhlosion holographic card for Expedition, as well as the non-holo version. This is a pretty cool looking Typhlosion, whose 3D generation doesn't take away from it at all. I actually think it looks quite cool. I like the pose and the cool background, and I feel like Hoshiba is really getting the hang of these cards at this point, so I'm excited to see more of them. Our next artist is Hiromichi Sugiyama, who worked on 4 cards for Expedition, and all of them were starters. The Charizard non-holo and holo, which can be shown flying through the air with a nice blue and green background, with white lines going everywhere. The Blastoise non-holo, which shoots water out of its cannons as debris flies up around it. And the Feraligatr, which has its mouth wide open with little bubble effects that can also be seen around it. To be honest, these cards, other than the Charizard, are kinda scary. There's just something off about them that I can't describe quite. Our next artist is Sumiyoshi Kizuki, who worked on 6 cards for Expedition, being the Butterfree non-holo and holo, which can be seen flying out of a window as the sun sets in the background. And there are also 2 Butterfrees. The Chansey, which can be seen healing an Apom holding an egg. The Jinx, which has a snowflake around its face as it looks straight on at the camera. The Mareep, which bounds forward as there's a textured yellow background. The Shelder, which can be seen peeking through some kelp. These cards are quite well done, and the more cards that Kizuki does, the more I have to say about their cards. Like, for a card like the Butterfree, the background is so detailed and it's just very lively, with those distinctive no outlines. And a card like the Shelter has some pretty thick outlines, and the vibe of the card is really awesome. Overall, Kizuki's cards are always something fun to look at, because of the varying styles of their cards. Next is Yuka Mori, who illustrated 7 cards for Expedition, and they illustrated the full Poliwag line for this set. The Poliwrath has one of its arms raised with some rocks in the background, and it looks very upset. The Poliwhirl is pretty goofy, as it blankly looks forward, and the background is very similar to the Poliwrath. Same thing for the Poliwag, which looks up and to the left, standing cutely. The Rattata bounds forward as it bares its fangs, and sand sits in the background. And then the Squirtle, number 131, is cute as it sits on the beach as it looks up, as rocks surround it. Finally, Mori worked on the Vulpix for this set, which looks over and to the right with the grassy floor and trees in the background. These clay cards that Mori makes are always awesome, and it's still one of the most unique ways that art has been created for the TCG. Miki Tanaka returns again for more cards in Expedition, 7 of them to be exact. The Vileplume non-holo and holo is very cute. I'm a fan of the pathway that the Vileplume is walking along, and it works pretty well as a holo. Then the Ivysaur looks to be shooting some kind of grass out of itself, as it looks to the right, upset. The Magmar shoots fire out of its mouth and sets everything around it ablaze. The Caterpie looks very cute as it stares forward and stands on a tree. The Chikorita number 99 looks back and to the left as it smiles and rain pours down. And finally, the Corsola sleeps as it lays flat in the water, which I just find kinda cute. Overall, Tanaka's cards are nice and simplistic, and I enjoy them in this set quite a bit. Shinichi Yoshida has returned to illustrate 7 cards for Expedition, and these cards have a very rugged shading style. The Kingler looks to be inside of a cave, as it looks forward and one of its claws covers pretty much the whole card, and the Machamp has its arms extended while it smiles, looking very upset. The same can of course be said about the non-holo versions of the cards, but the Machoke has its arm extended with a determined look on its face, and its other arms drift off to the side. The Krabby looks pretty cute, even though it has a super realistic shading style. And finally, the Machop looks forward, as it smiles. These cards by Yoshida are all quite nice, and I like the shading style that Yoshida has adapted over these sets. It makes their cards stand out amongst others, and the Pokemon that they were able to do are all cool renditions of cool Pokemon. Our next artist is one who seems to be creeping their way into set after set, which is a good thing, as I'm always happy to review their cards, and that artist is Yukiko Baba, who illustrated 6 cards for Expedition, being the Gengar Holo and Non-Holo, which shows Gengar looking straight forward as it smiles, and its ears are very notable, as it makes it kinda look like a cat in this card. The Haunter has its arms wide spread out as swirls can be seen in the background. Then, the Pupitar looks straight forward as hexagons can be seen in the background, with a green, black, and blue line that's behind everything. And then, the Ghastly can be seen in an alleyway, as little blue puffy smoke clouds come off of it. Finally, there's the Larvitar, which sits inside of a cave that we have an X-ray view of into. These cards by Baba are very cool. I like how simplistic but detailed the cards are. Like the cards are simplistic, but they always feel like they have a purpose. After Baba, Our next artist is Masako Yamashita, who's really made a name for themselves in this era of Pokemon cards, and they've done 6 cards for Expedition, being the Dugtrio Hollow and Non-Hollow, which can be seen breaking through the ground as it looks upset and determined, the Charmander number 97, which can be seen looking back as it stands near some sort of random orangey rocks, and the Nadiglet can be seen looking up with some grass around it, which kinda reminds me of the Diglett from base set. The Goldeen can be seen looking up as its tail swings in the current of water, and the Oddish looks super upset, which is pretty funny for an unthreatening Pokemon like Oddish. Overall, these cards by Yamashita are cute, and they convey a message in all of them, like the Dugtrio being upset or Diglett being curious. Ayakusube has done one evolution line in Expedition, being the Geodude line, starting off with the Golem, which can only sort of be seen in the frame, as it looks forward upset. That distinctive Kusube shading style really handing itself well to a Pokemon like Golem, with those colors. And there's a hollow and non-hollow version of this card. The Graveler looks forward as well, with a deep blood red sky that can be seen, and the Graveler smiles almost deviously. Finally, there's the Geodude, who looks at a flower, as one of its arms is resting on its head, which, I guess that's its head, and the other arm is around a rock. These cards are awesome, and they have a place in this set, as Kusube is a legendary artist who always puts their all into the cards that they do. Next, we'll talk about Kimi and Masago, who worked on 8 cards in Expedition. Let's start with the Blastoise Hollow and Non-Hollow. This card is really cool. I like how you can see Blastoise swimming through the water, as its cannons are above the water, and it looks cool as either a hollow or a non-hollow card. The Mewtwo is one of the coolest cards in the entire set, as the Mewtwo can be seen with its arms extended and fingers pointing down, as its tail bends around its body. In the non-hollow version of the card, you can really tell that the lightning in the background is actually there. In the Tyranitar, it kinda looks like Godzilla, with the water and the rocks surrounding it, as its mouth lays open. And finally, the Skarmory Hollow and Non-Hollow are beautiful renditions of a cool Pokemon. I like that the sky that's visible in the non-hollow version in this card, as it's deep and the colors are vivid. Masago never fails to amaze me when it comes to their realistic but awesome style. An artist whose praises I sung in verses, Atsuko Nishida, has made some awesome cards for Expedition, with 13 cards to talk about. Let's just get started with the Ampharos Hollow and Non-Hollow. This card is absolutely adorable. I love Ampharos's beady eyes as it looks up, and its big old body. The Ninetales Hollow and Non-Hollow is gorgeous too. I like how regal and elegant it looks in this card, with the bamboo surrounding it. The Pichu is super cute. Really interesting to put Pichu in as a hollow, but it's smiling and jumping up, and the flowers surround it all over the place. Same can be said with the Raichu, as it jumps up, but this time stars surround it. And in the non-hollow version, you can see a swirling blue vortex. Next, we'll talk about the Charizard number 39, which is awesome. It's cool to see Charizard, a typically very cool Pokemon, looking actually kinda cute. It's just the light shading that Nishida uses for their cards at this time, which makes these Pokemon look amazing. And now I can sing my praises for Venusaur, because this one is actually cute. Venusaur number 67 is cute and cool, as its vines swing from side to side. The Hitmonlee looks cool too, as it's in a battle-ready stance with its hands spread way out. The Wartortle looks to the left, very determined, as it flows through the water, and its tail is super bushy. Then, finally, the Pikachu, which is just plain adorable. The sky that is above it, as well as the little smile on its face, make it one of my favorite Pikachu cards so far. By far. Nishida's artwork is a masterclass. I love the shading that they use for their cards in this era, and I'm excited to see more from them. Our next artist is Kagemaru Himeno, who worked on 11 cards for Expedition, so we'll start with the Clefable Hollow, which shows the moon in the background as it looks forward. Very fitting for a mon like Clefable. And the bottom of the card has a city with lights on, and the Dragonite Hollow tries to stomp the camera as it flies, most likely in an action shot. And then, the Rapidash Hollow looks back at the camera as fire flies from the tail wildly. The Meganium number 53 is super cute. I like the trees around the Pokemon, as well as the way its face looks. The Croconaw looks to be trying to drink some water from a river. The Dragonair looks very elegant as it spins around. The Dratini is cute as it looks up, and the Ponyta looks back as giant craggy cliffs are behind it. These cards by Himeno are all very cute, and it's cool to see them illustrate a full Dragonite line and a full Ponyta line here. Are we almost at the top of this mountain yet? I feel like I've been climbing this for a while. Ah, um, looks like we're almost there, thankfully. Let's just get back to these artists. Our next artist is Kyoko Umemoto, who worked on 10 cards for Expedition. The first one we'll talk about is the Arbok, whose mouth is wide open as it looks towards the camera. Its teeth are all visible, which is pretty spooky. The Cloister looks up and to the left, and I kinda prefer the non-holo version of this card, as the background is polygonal and cool, with wavy lines on top and bottom. The Fearow is cool, I like how pointy it looks, but again, I prefer the non-holo version, with the cool clouds and the striking lines. The Cyndaquil number 105 is cool. I like how it's jumping around, with a ring of fire behind it. The colors are just nice, and the Ekans I can say the same for. The colors in this one are just awesome, and the way the Ekans is posed up is super awesome. I love the colors on this one. The Spearow has some nice colors, and the leaves around it are a nice touch as it looks up. And then finally, the Squirtle number 132 is really nice. I like how it's looking up kinda sad, with its eyes looking cute. I like the water background with the transparent water. And I like how all of Umamoto's cards have a very distinct style to them. I like the vivid colors that they use along with the interesting and striking backgrounds with their simplistic Pokemon or just interesting to look at Pokemon. Ah, we're finally at the top of the hill. The view from up here is awesome. I think I can see the entrance to the Water City from here, so I might as well finish our video up here on top of the mountain. Hajime Kusajima is a returning artist from Versus who illustrated 11 cards for Expedition, and first we'll talk about the Alakazam Holo. This card is gorgeous, probably one of the best renditions of this Pokemon that we've ever received. I don't know how to explain it, but Kusajima gives these Pokemon some kind of life that I don't feel from some of the other artists, which is just amazing. And while we're at it, we'll talk about the Abra and the Kadabra. The Abra is really awesome, projecting an after image on it, as there are more Abras on the left and the right, and the Kadabra wields its famous spoon as it pushes psychic energy forward. And then there's the Meganium Holo, which is super cute. I really love how in the non-holo version you can see flower petals below it. The Weezing is actually kind of scary. This card looks very interesting, but the holo part is on the gas of the non-holo version, which is interesting to note. And then there's also the Mew, which is beautiful. I really love how this is the first Mew card in a main set, so this is a good one to start with. I love how the non-holo has really nice colors and flowers in the background. Then, finally, there's the Coughing, which is scary, but the gas is a neat touch. But honestly, it is just scary. Kusujima is a really talented artist who I'm excited to see more of in the future. Next, we'll talk about Tomokazu Kamiya, who worked on 10 cards for Expedition. The Pidgeot Holo is very visually pleasing. I like how distinct the Pidgeot is, with it diving down to the ground. And the Charmeleon is really cool as well, as it swipes with its claw. The Pidgeotto flies upwards with some pillars on the ground, and the Bulbasaur looks towards the sky, with trees surrounding it. The Clefairy looks up as it smiles, and stands in a grass field, which is super cute. And then the Cubone lies on the ground and sleeping as it cries, with a little flower next to it, and it looks like it's sitting on a cliff. And I also like the colors in it. I like the Magikarp as well. One of them is bounding upwards, with a bunch of other ones surrounding it looking concerned. And then there's the Pidgey, which walks along in the grass, looking also very concerned. Then there's also a reprint of the Moo Moo Milk from Neogenesis. Kamiya's artworks are always so interesting to look at, and I'm happy that they worked on Expedition. Our final artist that we're looking at is Mitsuhiro Rita, who worked on 8 cards for Expedition. So we'll just start with Feraligatr, which swims through the water, in a similar way to the Blastoise, but this one is cool because of the swamp in the background that is visible in the non-holo version. And then there's the Magpie Holo, which looks forward as smoke comes up from the background, which is really cute. Then the Bayleaf stands on top of some lily pads, with the hole in its leaf letting the sun come through it, which is very awesome. The Flaffy lights up a Christmas tree with the electricity from its tail, which I find really cute. I like how it looks back at the tree with wonder. The Houndour stands straight down as it looks upset at the camera, and the desert can be seen in the background, which I really like. Then, finally, the Totodile chomps as it tries to eat or kill an Oddish, which is super awesome. Not because the Oddish might die, but it just gives Totodile a lot of character and personality, which is a good thing. It's also in a flower field, which I find super cute. I like all of these cards by Arita, and I just really appreciate that style that he does with the shading and everything else that he does with his cards. And, wow, Expedition was a really large set, but it didn't feel like it took that long to cover. When it comes to my favorite cards from the whole set, I really enjoy the Bulbasaur number 94, Pokemon Nurse, Butterfree, Holo and non-holo for that one, Graveler, Alakazam, Holo and non-holo, Charizard number 39, Feraligatr Holo and non-holo, and then the Mewtwo Holo and non-holo, as well as the Ekans. I kind of changed up how my setup for these videos worked, so this video didn't take as long to create as the last one, and this set was bigger than the last one. In our next video, I'm going to climb down this mountain, And also, we'll be covering Aquapolis. Thanks for watching. We're back on this mountain, just where we left off on the last episode, and I told you guys that I saw that underwater city in the distance. Now, let me find a way down this mountain, and while I'm doing that, I can give you a little bit of a rundown of what this set is, being Aquapolis. This is the second set in the E Series of Pokemon cards, which released in 2003, on January 15th. This set features a total of 186 cards, so this set is absolutely the biggest set that we've ever covered on the entire channel so far. This set also features many new artists who will be featured in the future, as well as being another set to feature secret rare cards. Something else to note about Aquapolis is that the holographic cards are separated into their own subset, being listed H1 through H32. These are just regular cards in Aquapolis, but holographic. But since they're listed weird on Cerebi, I'll just cover them at the end. It looks like my old gear won't really be necessary for this expedition, so let me put on something a little bit more appropriate. Hold on. Mm, yes, perfect. This is it. This nice little flannel will suffice perfectly fine. Ah, it looks like we made it to the bottom of the mountain. Finally, all I can see is empty desert. It looks empty and barren. Why would I think that an aquatic city would be anywhere near here? Oh, wait. Hold on. Oh, now I see it. Let me just go in that direction, and we can talk about the trainer cards first. Milky Sobe is a name that I'm sure you're used to hearing at this point, with the reprints of the Darkness and Metal Energy in the set, which were already reprinted in Expedition, but we needed them in this set, so I'll give him a pass. Takumi Akabane returns from Team Rocket to reprint the Rainbow Energy into Aquapolis, which is the same design that we saw in Team Rocket, with the little energy and the little colorful rings around it. Shinichi Yoshikawa returns from Expedition to illustrate 5 new cards for Aquapolis, being the Memory Berry, which features 2 berries lying on the floor, with vines around them, with a nice glisten can be seen on the Memory Berry. The Time Shard, which features a charm hanging off of what looks to be an underwater log, as some kind of creature hangs around behind it. The Boost Energy, which showcases a stormy cloud in the background as 3 colorless energies are featured in the middle, and a neat little white outline can be seen around the energies. I think you can also see rain in the background. Then, finally, the Crystal Energy, which shows a bunch of different colors clashing in the middle, as the energy contains all the different colors, which is a cool concept. Also, I forgot to mention, Yoshikawa also worked on the Healing Berry for the set, which is a berry that lies in a field. These cards are interesting, and Yoshikawa is clearly pretty talented when it comes to making interesting looking cards. An artist that we haven't seen in a second is Jungo Suzuki, who previously worked on the Remoraid from Neo Destiny, but now did the Weakness card from Aquapolis, which shows a Charmander literally trapped in a bubble with a cool black and blue background, which looks pretty cool. Suzuki has more cards in the future, so we'll see them again. Another returning artist is Big Mama Tagawa, who worked on 8 cards for Aquapolis, but they're all just cubes representing the different types, so I'll show off a few here, but these cards really are just cubes with energies on them, so there's not much of note, but I'm sure that they were useful in the TCG. Kazuo Yazawa is a new artist for the TCG in Aquapolis, being the person who illustrated the Pokemon Park, which shows Cyndaquil jumping up as Chikorita bounds forward and Pikachu walks along with a smile on its face. I like this card. It's cute for what it is, being just a simple trainer, but I like it, and we'll see more Yazawa in the future, so that's good. Kai Ishikawa is an artist who worked on 1 card for Aquapolis, being the power plant, which shows off a stadium with electricity surging from a power plant, which is pretty cool. And it's not just a reprint of another card, and we won't see the power plant ever again, I don't think. Our next artist is Ken Sugimori, who worked on 6 cards for Aquapolis. First off being the Forest Guardian, which stands next to a Noctowl. The vibe of this card is a little spooky, with a dark background. Then, the Juggler, that juggles Pokeballs as people around him watch in awe. The Pokemon fan club shows off a club holding up a Pichu, while other Pokemon hang out in the background. The Seer shows someone throwing up 2 Pokeballs as they look toward the camera, with a blood red background. The town volunteers show people helping out a Hoot Hoot and a Squirrel in a nice field. And finally, the traveling salesman shows off some wares and goods that they're most likely selling, and Pokeballs come out of little compartments that he has. Sugimori's trainers are always interesting, so I'm glad that that's what he's doing in this era. We're finally done with this long, endless, dry walkway. Finally, the beach. This looks to be our last stop before the underwater city. While we're here on the beach, let's just talk about some regulator cards that some of the artists worked on for this set. A new artist introduced in Aquapolis, Hizuki Mizono, who worked on 2 cards for Aquapolis, which are the Centret, which stands next to a tree that covers its mouth up, and the Mareep, which frolics in the field with some mountains in the background. These cards are kind of reminiscent of Mori's clay cards, but it looks like a different style of clay, and for 2 new cards, they're quite nice. The next artist is a mainstay who received 4 cards in Aquapolis, being Keiji Kinebuchi, and these are actually the last unique cards that they ever illustrated for the Pokemon TCG, which is actually really sad, as this artist has been with the TCG since all the way back in base set. Seeing them go so soon really stinks, but at least for his final cards, Kinebuchi was able to do 2 Pokemon, being the Grimer, which has its mouth open as it stands in a dark alleyway, and it looks up at the camera, and the Voltorb, which looks to the right as its eyes furl to make it look upset. The super energy removal too shows many energies flowing around in a circle, and the warp energy showcases an energy that has blue lines coming from the top and the bottom, and on the side, deep dark deep blue is on the left and right. Overall, Kinebuchi's cards are really nice, especially the Pokemon. Too bad these are the last cards that Kinebuchi officially worked on, as the rest were all just straight reprints, so we will see his name in the future, but, you know, it won't mean anything, unfortunately. Toshino Aoki worked on 2 cards for the set, being the Kangaskhan, which looks forward as its nice shading effect is behind it, and the Pinsir, which looks forward with an evil grin on its face, as it holds onto the rocks around it, and sun rays can be shown peeking through the top of the canopy. A new artist working on Aquapolis is Midori Harada, who worked on 7 cards for the set, being the Cubone, which is either juggling bones or levitating with his mind, and the background has a nice purple to orange gradient. The Eevee, which runs into a city, and it looks behind it, with its big and fluffy tail that can be seen. The Houndour, which is mid-action as it looks to the right, and a bunch of rocks are around it with some grass seen below it. Scyther looks back and primes its scythe and its wings can be seen on full display. The Sneasel is crawling along the ground and it's surrounded by lush plants. The apricorn forest is a stadium, as it can be seen carved out. There are a bunch of apricorn trees around the stadium, which I like a bit. And finally for Harada, the Undersea Ruins, which looks to be another stadium, but this one has rocks and pillars around it that you can see light peeking through the water. Overall, for first cards, Harada really knocked it out of the park, and I quite enjoy all the cards that they worked on for Aquapolis. Our next artist is one who worked on 5 cards for Aquapolis, being Keiko Fukuyama, who hasn't worked on any cards since a mini set, Southern Islands, which I will be covering after our next set. But for Aquapolis, they worked on the Bellsprout, which holds apricorns as they walk along, the Nidoran, which looks forward as a rainbow can be seen in the background, and the Vulpix, which plays with an apricorn as bushes of apricorns are behind it. The Psyduck, which swings on a little swing as it smiles with a cool little park in the background. And it looks like it's being held together with little Pokeballs, though we can't really see the top of the swing, funnily enough. Also, the Wooper, which has another Wooper next to it, as they try to ride umbrellas in a lake. Overall, Fukuyama's cards are all very cute. They provide character to the Pokemon represented, and they are all quite cute, like I said. Our next artist is Miki Tanaka, who worked on 7 cards for Aquapolis, being the Victory Bell, which is over on its side, as it appears to be spewing some kind of gas out of its mouth, and the trees are in the background. The Weepin' Bell, which can just be seen smiling, as it's surrounded by some foliage. The Goldeen, which smiles derpily as it careens through the water. The Paris, which just stands still as leaves almost cover it, and a lush forest surrounds it. The Smeargle, which looks to have just finished the painting, and it sleeps next to a tree. The Spinarak, which stands on top of the tree line, as it looks down onto the pathway below it. And finally, the Togepi, which walks along the pathway and smiles, as flowers are on either side of it. These Tanaka cards are all really quite cute, and I like these cards quite a bit, because of that simplistic Tanaka style. Ayakusube was able to work on the full Slowpoke evolution line, starting with the Slowbro, which dives under the water as a Magikarp swims away from it, which looks really nice. The Slowking, which overlooks an island as it sits on a rock and smiles. And finally, the Slowpoke, which sleeps on the floor and its tail coils around its body. The leaves around it are also a nice touch. These cards have a lot lighter outlines than Kusube's cards from Expedition, but the cards still look really nice, and you can still tell that Ayakusube worked on them. Another returning artist is Tomokazu Kamiya, who has returned from Expedition to work on 6 cards for Aquapolis, being the Primeape, which punches the ground and as apricorns fly up into the air, the Tyrogue, which grabs at the camera and looking super upset, as its other hand is balled up into a fist. The Hitmonchan swings its fist back and forth as it looks super concerned. The Hitmontop kicks as it's spinning, while also looking a little concerned. The Mankey looks backwards as it looks at a rainbow, and you can see apricorns around it. Then finally, the Tangela looks even more concerned as it hangs from a branch, as houses can be seen in the background, with a lot of grass and foliage, and the clouds and mountains can be seen in the background. Another returning artist is Masako Yamashita, who worked on 4 cards for Aquapolis, being the Parasect, which sits next to a tree, the Bellsprout, which can be seen standing also as well near a tree, with some rocks on the side, the spin rack number 62, which is going out of some kind of building, or a box, and the Porygon, which seems to be sitting in some kind of little vortex, as it's surrounded by a bunch of objects. I like these cards, as they're all giving something unique to the table, especially the spin rack, with all those different colors. Now, we can talk about a new artist, who only worked on 3 cards, but in their career, they've worked on so many cards for the TCG, being Koki Saito. They worked on the Octillery, which can be seen looking back into the left, with some ruins behind it, and waves crashing in the bottom. The Rapidash, which bounds through the scene with some speed lines indicating how fast it's going. And finally, for Aquapolis, the Miltank, which looks upwards as it does something? I don't know. But there's grass and flowers behind it, and a rocky mountain as well. For first cards, Koki Saito can be shown to be a talented artist who has a knack for making appealing and pleasant cards. Yukamori returns to make some more claymated cards for the set. The Jumpluff smiles as one of its arms swings down and surrounded by blurred grass. The Lantern swims along as some rocks are behind it as it swims through the water. The Skiploom smiles as it looks forward with another blurry background. The Chinchou illuminates the floor behind it, and there are bricks underneath it. And of course, it's under the water. The Hoppip looks down with another blurry background, and the Lickitung has its tongue completely extended as it looks forwards, with some leaves around it. Overall, these clay cards are nice by Mori, and they show a nice little different look from how they used to, with slightly darker colors overall. Our next artist is Yukiko Baba, who illustrated 8 cards for the set. The Executor sits on a rock with a lake behind it, as the middle head smiles and looks to the right. The Dodrio looks in a field with all of its heads looking to the left. The Marill sits on top of one of those things they put on top of the stores and shops, as it smiles and raises one of its arms. The Voltorb looks suspiciously to the right, as it floats in the city. The Doduo stands behind it in the same field that the Dodrio stood in, but from what it looks like, I think it's a crop circle. The Execute stands in the middle of a bunch of leaves, as all the eggs look in different directions. The Growlithe looks as it stands off some kind of pillar, and a watchtower can be seen in the background. The final card that Baba worked on in Aquapolis was the Mr. Mime, which raises one of its arms and looks upwards, and a city in the background can be seen as well. Baba's cards are all very distinctive and fit well in the set. But for this set, I think I'm going to try to separate it into 2 videos to make it a little bit easier on myself. So I'll see you in part 2. I'll probably try to mesh them into the same video at some point, so we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching. Looks like we've made it to... Wait, never mind. I don't think this is it, right? No, this is not it. I really don't think this is it. Anyways, I mean, we can just get on with the things as we keep walking along, as I need something to break this up. Hisao Nakamura is a new artist introduced into Aquapolis, who worked on 6 cards, being the Jinx, which shoots water as it slams into the ground, the Caesar, which punches through the ground and looks forwards, and the Scyther's scythe pushes forward, and the one behind it hangs down, as it looks super upset. The Chinchou rushes forward with an upset anger, and bright red light oozes off of the lights of the Chinchou. The Drowsy sleeps smiling, as it's surrounded by foliage, and a clock tower can be seen in the back. The Horsey is sleeping on top of a shelter, which looks angrily up at it, as there's kelps and rocks in the background. For new artist, Nakamura's artwork is really nice, and I specifically really love the Horsey. Hikaru Koike is not an artist who's new, but this is their first time working on an actual Pokemon for a main series set, being the Elekid, which shoots out so much voltage out of itself. Sparks can be seen shot out of it as it looks upset and looking up. The Magneton has these really wonderful dark colors with dark shading and a power plant in the background. The Porygon 2 stands next to a cage and the background is really, really dark as well. These cards have a really nice dark shading style that I'm sure we'll see more of in the future, and these 3D cards all look really nice. Another returning artist is Kyoku Umamoto, who illustrated 6 cards for Aquapolis, being the Arcanine, which fur almost looks cloudy as it walks along a pathway in a beautiful city. The Espeon looks to be in the same city as it walks up some different stairs instead of walking down the pathway. The Vileplume stares at its own reflection as a water droplet falls down from a leaf above it. The Gloom sleeps as it sits on a tree, with mountains and an ocean in the background. The Growlithe seems to be in the same area as the Arcanine and the Espeon, but on a different staircase. And finally, the Oddish coasts on the water on a leaf, as the moon illuminates a silver that highlights the Oddish. Our next artist is Sumiyoshi Kizuki, who worked on 5 cards for Aquapolis, being the Blossom, which looks across a green pond, with a deep night sky in the background. The Executor jumps around with some deep field in the background, with an orange sky. The Golduck looks to have just come out of the water, as a lighthouse blares its light sweeping across the screen. and the Sea King swims along as it looks to the left, and vibrant colors are all over this card. Finally, the Execute is in the same field that the Executor was in, but these ones are all jumping around, with some smirks, some sleeping, very random, but very purposeful. I like the Kizuki cards because of their ever-evolving and changing style. Our next artist is Shinichi Yoshida, who worked on 6 cards for Aquapolist. And first, we'll start with the Ampharos, which smiles as it sits on top of a hill, and then the Eridos, which looks upset as it looks to the left. The Flaffy stands to the left, with a big tree in the background. The Magnemite looks up as it's surrounded by electricity, and the Ponyta dashes forwards. The Electrodes floats around as it smiles deviously with the night sky and stars in the background. Our next artist is Kagemaru Himeno, who worked on 8 cards for Aquapolis, being the Azumarill, which sits on a boat and looks up as it smiles, the Ninetales, which prances with another Ninetales, the Sudowoodo, which comes with a squad and walks past apricorns, the Togetic, which looks to match the Azumarill, the Marowak, which holds up its bone as it looks up, the Nidorino, which seems to be fighting with another Nidorino, the Smoochum, which sits there to be in a which looks to be in the same city as a Togetic, and the Aipom, which grabs an apricorn from a tree. These cards all have that nice Himeno shading to them, and are all quite cute. Our next artist is Atsuko Nishida, who worked on 8 cards for Aquapolis, being the Entei, which prances as its fur looks cloudy and flowy, the Kingdra, which swims in the depths of the ocean, the Suicune, which looks to the left, the Furret, which stands on a different Furret, the Wooper, which is really sad for some reason, the Chansey, which looks at a machine, the Horsey, which can be seen standing near a different Horsey, and the Houndour, which prances along with a devious look on its face. These cards really show off Nishida's skills in shading and show off what unique and specific cards Nishida is able to create. Our next artist is Hajime Kusajima, who worked on 8 cards for Aquapolis, being the Houndoom, which is one of the most gorgeous cards I've ever seen before, with it all balled up standing on top of a mountain with a dead tree beside it, and a sky going from a gradient from dark to light. The Muck, which extends its arm, the Steelix, which almost looks like it's underwater, the Tentacruel swims along as it looks down at the camera, the Zapdos flies forward as lightning balls follow behind it, with a nice neon sheen on the Pokemon itself. The Magnemite may be my favorite card in the whole entire set. I love how its eye reflects off the light, with a deep shading and wonderful colors. The Onix looks back towards the sun as it radiates onto the Onix itself. The Tentacool swims along some shallow waters, reflecting against the surface. These cards are some of the most beautiful cards that the TCG has seen so far, and I love all of them so much. Our next artist is Mitsuhiro Rita, who worked on 7 cards. The Donphan, which bursts around a house, the Hypno, which eats the dreams of someone, and the Lantern, which irradiates the water that it swims in. The Quagsire seems to be in a similar area to the Lantern, but it looks back with a derpy face. The Umbreon is in a city, but at night, as it sits on top of a roof and looks across. The Seadra looks forward under the water, and light peaks below the water. The Remoraid, which shoots water upwards as it hovers on top of the water. Arita's artwork has always been amazing, and this is no different. Ah, we finally made it to the underwater city. I'm so glad that we're finally here. Now, we can talk about the remaining parts of this set, and Aquapolis is nearing its end. Naoki Mura worked on 8 cards for this set. The Blissey looks really big as it smiles. The Houndoom shoots fire out of its mouth as it splashes around. The Nidoking swipes as the sun rises in the background. That Tyranitar stands straight up as lightning strikes in the back. The Pupitar is jumping up while looking super upset, and the Larvitar looks to be eating a rock. The Phanpy looks up while it smiles, and, um, yes, we have something to talk about. So, remember when I said there were secret rares in this set? Yeah, we're not going to be talking about cards like the Shinings from the previous sets. We're actually going to be talking about a completely new gimmick that was created for this set alone, along with the next one. And that gimmick is Crystal Pokemon. So first, let's talk about the Crystal Lugia. This card is one of the holy lights of the Pokemon TCG. When you talk about vintage grails, this is like almost number 1 on the whole list, and it's a gorgeous card. Lugia screams as it looks up and its wings flap from side to side, up and down. The card is awesome, with its colored and semi-textured self, along with seeing some lightning in the background with some water below it. Our next artist who worked on Aquapolis is Mikio Menjo, who worked on the Energy Switch Trainer card, which has a close-up of Meryl and a water energy, which is in the middle. But we're not here to talk about that, even though it is a cool-looking trainer card. We're here to talk about the Crystal Kingdra, which swims along the water with giant pillars in the background. This card is also quite gorgeous, which is, of course, something to note. I like how Kingdra looks forward. It looks quite menacing. And our final artist for Aquapolis is Hironobu Yoshida, who worked on just one card, which is the Crystal Nidoking, which is amazing. I love how intense it looks, and the effects mixed with the holofoil. The card is really awesome, and it's another vintage grail. It's also nice to see a Pokemon like Nidoking getting a form of a new chase card. Now, let's get over all these holo cards, which were put into the H1 through H32 subset, starting with the Ampharos by Shinichi Yoshida, the Arcanine by Kyoko Uemoto, the Ariados by Yoshida again, the Blossom by Sumiyoshi Kizuki, the Azumarill by Kagemaru Himeno, the Blissey by Naoya Kimura, the Electrode by Yoshida again, the Entei by Atsuko Nishida, the Espeon by Kyoko Imimoto again, the Executor by Yukiko Baba, the Houndoom by Hajime Kusajima, the Hypno by Mitsuhiro Rita, the Jumpluff by Yuka Mori, the Kingdra by Nishida's Get, Lantern by Mori, Magneton by Hikaru Koike, Muck by Kusajima, Nidoking by Kimura, Ninetales by Himeno, Octillery by Koki Saito, Caesar by Hisao Nakamura, Slowking by Ayakusube, Steelix by Kusajima, Suruwudo by Himeno, Suicune by Nishida, Tentacruel by Kusajima, Togetic by Himeno, Tyranitar by Kimura, Umbreon by Arita, Victreebel by Miki Tanaka, Vileplume by Uemoto, and finally, the Zapdos by Kusajima. These holo cards are some of the most expensive and sought-after holo cards in the entire vintage Pokemon era that we're in the WOTC era, and all these cards have a good reason to be a holo card. And with that, that was Aquapolis. And I know that I made these two as a 1 and 2 part video, but I think I just needed to do it because I was getting a little bit burnt out, and I needed to kind of break it up a little bit. Anyways, that set was a huge set filled with tons of gorgeous artworks. You could look at any one card from this set for hours and still not be bored, I'm sure. 3 crystals and like 32 holos is a lot of shine for you to collect. Anyways, my favorite cards in the set are the Magnemite, Crystal Lugia, of course, Umbreon, Zapdos, Arcanine, Espeon, Houndoom, both of the 2 Houndoom cards that people drew, Caesar, Tyranitar, the Horsey, and the Voltorb by Keiji Kinabuchi. Wow, that's a lot of cards that I can call my favorites. There are so many more cards in the set that I love. In our next set, we'll be reviewing Skyridge, and we're gonna need to go to the legendary Sky Island for that, so wish me luck. Anyways, thanks for watching.
Hello. I just wanted to preface this video by saying that I am feeling a little bit under the weather, but I did want to record a video because I need to upload something to my channel. Ah, we finally made it to Skyridge, the most anticipated and penultimate set of the Wizards of the Coast era of Pokemon cards. Some of the most gorgeous artwork lies in the set, and I just get to cover it casually like this? Well, color me impressed, because I'm glad I got back into things. First, though, we're gonna have to get out of this underwater area, and I think I want to get out from the back here. But while we're talking, I can give a little insight on the set. This set was released May 12th, 2003, and features 182 cards, which is 2 less than Aquapolis. So that means that there will be 2 less cards for me to cover. This set also features the highest profile artists that this era has, and multiple artists get more than 1 card in this set, which just shows you that they were really going all out. This set features a total of 28 artists that worked on the set, and this is the last set in the E Series, technically, of Pokemon cards, considering the fact that since this is the last set that the Wizards of the Coast brand actually published for the Pokemon TCG. That's probably a good reason as to why it's so gargantuan and packed with high-profile artwork. Probably just because it's their final set, and they wanted to end off with a bang. But something else of to note is that it features more gorgeous secret rare Pokemon cards, and it's a continuation of the series that started in Aquapolis. Anyways, looks like we made it to the runway. I needed to get here so we could get started trying to find some way to actually get to the Sky Island, so I think I'll just figure that out as we go. But for now, let's just talk about a new artist, being Ken Ikuji, who worked on the Mystery Zone, which features a giant floating ball around a stadium with dead trees around it. The card is a little preposterous, but it's at least pretty interesting, as there are multiple things happening in the card, which make it stand out, and for a first card, I can't rag on Ikuji too much. For our next artist, we'll be talking about Shinichi Yoshikawa, and first, we'll talk about the bounce energy, which shows two energies that almost look elastic bounding upwards, as a light is shown above them, and a little blue trail can be seen below them. The cyclone energy showcases an energy in the middle of, well, a cyclone. Jokes aside, the effect on the wind looks quite nice, and I like the different colors as it goes from dark in the middle to light on the outside. The final card that Yoshikawa worked on was the Retro Energy, which showcases an energy in the middle of what looks to be a strand of DNA wrapping around it, and one in the background as well. I like the light yellow background on this card quite a bit, as well as the light coming off the energy. These three cards by Yoshikawa may all be energies, but I think they're at least interesting, and there's something to note about them. Our next artist is Hiromichi Sugiyama, who worked on a bunch of cards for Skyridge, but first we'll talk about the Miracle Sphere Alpha, which shows what I assume to be one of the Miracle Spheres with some cracked molten ground below it. The Miracle Sphere Beta looks to be another sphere, but this one looks to be underwater, as light shoots off the ball and glows blue and red. Then, the Miracle Sphere Upsilon lays in a grassy field as light erupts out of it. Then, there's the Mystery Plate Alpha, which shows a plate laying out in the sand with light peeking into the area. The Mystery Plate Beta, which hangs around some other rock, and some birds fly around the plate. The Mystery Plate Upsilon sits in a cave, with more light pushing onto it as well, as the cave entrance is on the right. Then, finally for Sugiyama, the Mystery Plate Delta, which looks to be in a lush field, as light spills onto it. Something I noticed about all the plates is that they're all very distinct locations, which makes them all feel unique. Mixed with the settings, make the cards look ancient and interesting. A returning artist is Jungo Suzuki, who worked on two cards for Skyridge, being the Crystal Shard, which shows a crystal necklace laying on top of some rocks, as a faint glow lights up the area around it, and the Star Piece, which lays on the ground as light irradiates off of it. These two cards are definitely serviceable, the Star Piece being the more interesting one in my opinion. I just like when the artist uses light as a concept or a feature in their cards. Our next artist is a name that hasn't been said since Versus, being Katsura Tabata, who worked on a handful of cards for the set. And Tabata is the first artist that we'll be talking about that has an actual Pokemon card, being the Skarmory, which flies into the air as we get a good top-down view of the Pokemon, with a crop circle being visible on the floor. Then, the Fastball, which has lines indicating how fast the ball is actually going as it flies through the air, and it has a lightning bolt on top of it, as well as projecting an afterimage. The friend ball has a nice pink background. Unfortunately, the design of the friend ball is kinda ugly, being a green and red, but that's not really Tabata's fault. The card also features an afterimage as well. The Hyper Potion is a new card in this set which showcases what I assume to be the Hyper Potion, as you get a good 3/4 angle of the potion, with a circle below it. And finally, the Lure Ball has a ring around it, as water ripples below it, showing off its affiliation with water. Tabata's trainer cards in the set are quite good. I like how they all feel a little bit different, as they should, but I feel like sometimes the trainers will all sort of blend in with each other sometimes. But as for the Skarmory, I actually really like this one, and I really like the top-down bird's eye view that we get on it with some clouds around it. An artist that I should have talked about a second ago would be Atsuko Ujie, who worked on the Buried Fossil card for the set, which actually features an HP value, which is interesting. Anyways, the card features the three fossils that the Pokemon can come from, being Ammonite, Kabuto, and Aerodactyl, which is shown in a cool way, with neat cracks and rocks around. For a single card, Ujie has a pretty interesting one, especially with that grainy texture on the card. Now, we can talk about Miki Tanaka, who worked on 7 cards for the set. Firstly, we'll talk about the Cleffa, which I think is on the moon, as it smiles and jumps around, and possibly evil triangles are in the background. The Machop shows it punching forwards as some kind of energy or waterfall is in the background with some mountains and a nice blue sky. The Natu looks upwards at the deep blue sky, which shows to be a little darker, and a ball reflects all of the Natu's head back onto it, and there is another ball to the left of it. The Poliwag is just walking along, as a bunch of grass surrounds it, and he looks very happy. The Sandslash looks up as it primes its claws, and the dunes stretch into the background. The Sunflora looks up at the camera as a waterfall flows in the background, with a tree on the right. You can see that Sunflora is standing on some sort of rock or cliff. And finally for Tanaka, the Yanma, which just flies along the empty dunes, which is simplistic but very effective. I think that's something you can say about a lot of Tanaka's cards. They really just exude that simplistic beauty that Pokemon is able to bring out. Well, Skyridge seems to be the set that's putting a quick and swift end to some artists entirely, and one of those artists that we're seeing leave the TCG is Keiko Fukuyama, but at least they were able to do a few cards before they left. One of those being the Abra, which covers its face as the sun almost blinds it, and a lovely flourishing city can be seen near the desert that it treasures through. The Igglybuff dips one of its little feet into the water as there are flowers that surround it, and lush trees and a forest can be seen as well. The Magikarp are shown in a pack as they climb up a waterfall, and the three determined Magikarp are seen going up at record pace. The Meowth seems to be eating an apricorn as it sits in a tree, right near the same oasis city that can be seen in the Abra card. The Staryu is very dynamic, as the Pokemon covers its own eye as it balances on one leg, in some kinda icy cave, with Golbats in the background. And this card also features a nice deep to light blue background with some water. Finally for Fukuyama, the Weedle, which floats along a leaf as it goes down the flowing river. And I like the colors that Fukuyama used for the Weedle, as they aren't very common colors for a Pokemon like this. Overall, these cards are really nice, and the style that Fukuyama built while they were working on the TCG can be felt all these years later, with really stunning renditions of Pokemon like Abra or Staryu. Another artist whose final cards were in Skyrish is Hizuki Mizono, but to be fair, they only have 4 cards in their entire repertoire. Even still, it's sad to see them go so soon. They worked on the Wigglytuff, which is very round, and it looks to the left as this tree blossoms, and a deep purple sky is seen in the background. Then, the Hoot, which flies in the sky. I like how the plain white can be interpreted, like I can see it as the sky, or I can see it as a piece of clay. I like these cards because they give me very vintage vibes, and the weird and interesting art style makes you take a double take because there are only 2 cards like this in this entire set, and in Aquapolis. And Misono's clay style doesn't really clash with Mori's style at all, so it makes you take a double take, truly. Well, looks like we're talking about another artist whose last card was in Skyridge, being Masako Yamashita, who worked on a couple of cards for this set, being the Growlithe, which looks over to the right confidently, and it's surrounded by many bricks and trees, the Ladybug, which looks over to the right as well, as blades of grass surround it, and another Ladybug fly away from it into the light baby blue sky. The Nidoran, which looks down at the water below it, as it wants to drink from the water, or it could be looking at its own reflection. And finally, the Rattata, which seems to be kicking some dust or dirt behind it, as its mouth lays wide open. I feel like Yamashita really has some standout cards, especially the Growlithe and the Ladybug. But also, Yamashita really has been at it since Neo Revelation, making interesting cards that have different themes. But I think the most prevalent theme between all these cards is the idea of nature, especially cards like the Vulpix from Neo Destiny,
Not to mention also the Light Ninetales from Neo Destiny.
Parasect from Aquapolis, or the Nidoran from Skyridge. They're all just a lot of cards that Yamashita have that have simple ideas but are executed very well as more abstract cards like the Spinarak from Aquapolis, or the Porygon, that make you look twice to just admire the artwork. Too bad Yamashita won't be featured in any other new cards anytime soon. If there's an artist that I want to return with a random common or uncommon card, it'd probably be Yamashita for the time being. I think I'll wrap up this first part of this massive set here. I want to give enough time for each part of the set, and I think the first part was the perfect time to introduce some of the artists who worked on some of the more basic Pokemon that received, as well as a lot of the trainers that we got in this set. But that doesn't mean that these cards aren't beautiful and are part of an amazing set. These cards are the cornerstone of what make this set so amazing in the first place. So, until next time, in Skyridge Part 2.
Welcome back to Skyridge. I'm assuming you came from my last video, as that would logically make sense, and it looks like I've worked my way into this hot air balloon, and we're just coasting through the sky right now. I think we're going to be here for a while, but I'll let you know when we land, and it might take some time. But this time, we'll be starting off by talking about Tomokazu Kamiya, who worked on 7 cards for this set. The first card that they did would be the Diglett, which looks forward as a nice lake can be seen in the background, as well as the sky. The Diglett looks almost sad as well. The Ditto, which appears to be in some sort of ancient cave, with some cave paintings being shown on the wall. One of the paintings looks like Firo, and one looks like Doduo, and Ditto stands in the bottom right looking very upset. The Dugtrio has faces looking in all different directions, as another large lake can be seen behind them. But I just like the expressions on the different heads, as well as the long noses on the creatures. The Golbat showcases a Golbat, obviously, as it screams down at the ground and flies through the sky. I like the thing that's etched into the ground. I'm tempted to call it a crop circle, but it's not really a circle. It's in the shape of a Pokemon. The Granbull looks extremely upset as many bushes and trees are in the background. I like how in focus Granbull is in the card, along with the intensity. The Murkrow is pretty derpy, as its beak is enormous and takes up a lot of space on the card, but I like the shape of the Murkrow, with it looking to the left almost suspiciously, and the bamboo in the background is quite nice, along with the lake and trees. And finally for Kamiya, the Venonat, which is very stylistic. I like how it looks like it's jumping upwards as the sky shines onto it, with some nice trees in the background. These Kamiya cards are all quite nice and make a good addition to the Skyridge set. Our next artist is Kagemaru Himeno, who's a name you've probably expected at this point, as they're a titan when it comes to artwork in the Pokemon TCG, so of course we'd see them here. And the first card on our list is the Wobbuffet, which showcases two separate Wobbuffet traveling and exploring a cave, with one of them looking back, almost shy. The Raticate looks upwards, and another one sits to the right. I like the lens flares on this card as well as the grass around them. The Teddiursa looks at the camera as it stands near a hot spring, and another one can be spotted in the background. Himeno is also able to work on some trainers for Skyridge. The Relic Hunter, which looks onwards as Zafira flies in the background. I kinda like the super big glove that the Hunter wears, and it's just a cool trainer card. The Apricorn Maker showcases, well, an Apricorn Maker. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory, but I like the pose that he's in, and he just seems to be chillin' as he sits down and inspects an Apricorn, with a bunch of them around him. Of course, if you don't know, apricorns are what is used in the Pokemon games and series to make Pokeballs. The Desert Shaman holds out its arms as the moon sits in the background, and I like the faded purple background with a nice closing of the shaman. The fisherman holds out his rod and moves one of his arms to the side, and I like the river that flows in the background. The oracle lays down writing some kind of book, and something cool to note about this card is that it features Umbreon on it. While doing a little bit of research on this card, it turns out that the regular uncommon trainer card in this set is worth about $15 for a near mint copy, which is ridiculous. Finally, the Underground Expedition showcases some people working underground as they delve deeper into the caverns with neat little outfits. Something I'm noticing about Himeno's trainer cards is that they're all really put together and their soul is really put into the outfits of the characters. I really like the gloves and the gear. It's just super unique. And the Pokemon cards featuring multiple Pokemon will always be a plus in my book, honestly. Our next artist that we'll be talking about is Hisao Nakamura, who worked on quite a few cards in the set, starting with the Machoke, which punches a crater into the ground, with some beams of light flowing into the background. I also just like the expression of the Pokemon that as it stares forwards. The Kakuna is nice too. I like the perspective. It makes the Pokemon look quite long and very menacing, as it floats above some water and some rocks. The Poliwhirl looks to be diving into some water, as it jumps forwards with some beautiful teal water, and some light peeks onto the cave that it's in. The Rhyhorn is quite menacing. The Pokemon covers the entire card as you can see every part of its face, and the back of it is imposing and interesting. The seal seems to be scratching its head as multiple other seals swim into the water that it's inside of. The Snubbull seems to be about to be falling off of a tree as it looks down into an oasis city that was seen in previous cards. And finally, we have the Zubat, which has a whole horde of Zubat as they fly through a deep and dark cave. I love the deep and dark shading present on a lot of these cards, and the poses of the actions that the Pokemon make Nakamura's cards feel very memorable, especially a Pokemon like Machoke or Snubbull. Now, we'll talk about Shinichi Yoshida, who actually stopped creating new Pokemon cards after Skyridge, which I find very sad, as there are many iconic Pokemon cards created by Yoshida, so we'll just talk about the three that they did for this set, starting with the Piloswine, which sits still as it stands on top of a big rock, and I like the many different jagged rocks behind the Piloswine. The Gligar, which flies through the sky as it looks forwards angrily, with some speed lines in the background. And finally for Yoshida, the Magnemite, which just hovers through the air as a dark shadow is cast onto it. I like the muted background and colors present in Yoshida's cards, and I'm still really impressed with the pure quality of artwork that Yoshida has presented to the Pokemon TCG in their 3-ish year run in the English TCG. I'm happy to own at least one of Yoshida's cards that they have, and they will be remembered until mentioned again. Our next artist is Aya Kusube, who worked again on 3 cards for Skyridge, but this time they worked on all unique cards. Firstly, we have the Arcanine. This card really gives me those majestic vibes that make this card almost look old and regal. I like how sharp Arcanine looks in this card, as well as the dark and very, very muted background. I really love this rendition of Arcanine, and it's just very interesting and grabbing. The Lapras swims along the water, as you can see its fins below the surface of the water, and a nice mountain can be seen and some shrubbery in the background. This card doesn't completely feature Lapras, but it is a good angle and the camera still shows off the Pokemon quite well. Finally for Kusube, the Stantler looks back at the camera as it looks up onto it, and a nice blue sky is a very nice touch. The rocks are very nice as well. I just like the little details on this card overall. Kusube is a very talented artist, and even though they only received 3 cards for the set, I'll always love that super unique shading style. Our next artist is Kimiya Masago, who always impresses with their realistic and special artworks, starting with the creepy freaking Alakazam, which stands straight and looks forward. I like the symmetry on this card, and it just looks straight scary. I mean, the pose and everything is just menacing. The Crobat hang on the tree branch above them as they hang upside down, and a pack of many Crobat fly towards the camera. Even though it sort of looks like the bats are copy and pasted, they clearly aren't because you can see the slight differences in them. I mean, these are gorgeous, with the dark shading and deep lighting. The Gyarados is another symmetrical card as it stands forward and screams directly at the camera, yet another terrifying card by Masago, and I almost like the explosion-like bright oranges that can be seen in the card. And finally for Masago, they worked on the Houndoom, which howls at the sky, with a deep and dark fog surrounding the dog, and the rocks below it are barely visible. I like the dark shading on all these cards, they're so distinctive, and they're good cards for an amazing set. Our next artist will be one that's really found their footing in Aquapolis, and is back to hit more of their shading stride in Skyridge. Midori Harada has this really nice style that almost reminds me a little bit of a lighter version of Kusube's style. Starting with the Fortress, I like how it's looking back at the camera, and I really like the sharp shading that really evokes the grimy and realistic kind of feeling, while still absolutely staying in the world of Pokemon. The next card is Farfetch'd, and I feel like we haven't seen him in a bit, but still, this card is cool, and I like the steam rising up from it. It looks pretty upset as it raises one of its wings up and holds its leek to the side. I like the vibe of the card quite a lot, and it sits on the little pond. The Nidorina looks at some kind of ancient ruins in confusion and intrigue. I like how segmented the different parts of the Pokemon are in the card, as well as the drastically differing colors. The Pineco looks to the right, which is funny as the Fortress looks to the left, but the Pineco is cool. And I like the very wavy branches around it, and like I said, it has that really nice shading style. Then there's the Nidoran number 81, which looks confused at a Zapdos statue that faces away from the camera. I like how concerned the Nidoran card looks, and like I said with the Nidorina, I like the color contrast in the card. I like this card quite a bit. The ancient ruins have a nice deep dark lighting in the card, along with the cool pillars that make this a nice looking stadium card. The Mirage Stadium also looks nice, and I like the fake water in the background with a stadium in the foreground. I like how the sky is along with it as well. The underground lake is quite nice as well. I like how there's a little bit of water surrounding the actual stadium, and I just like when stadium cards showcase differences in the actual scenery for the cards. I like these cards by Harada, with that really unique shading style that's pleasing to the eyes. Another artist who seems to be flexing their creative muscles is Hikaru Koike, who really showed up with the Magneton from Aquapolis, but they're back to make some more really amazing cards for Skyridge, starting with the Beedrill, which flies with a pack, and even though the card is 3D generated, the shading on its style is gorgeous, with the buzzing wings around the creatures. And then there's the Jolteon, which stares forward as leaves surround them, and I like how almost small the Jolteon looks in the card, mixed with the color contrast. The Ladian flies towards the moon, and some sort of pollen or some kind of flowers follow behind it, and all the other aspects of the cards. Finally, for Koike, I have a card that really emits the raw energy from the other cards they've done. The Steelix. I mean, this card is just iconic for the set in my opinion. Dude, the shading in it is absurd. This Pokemon looks so dark and so menacing, with that blood-red webbed background. It makes a Pokemon like Steelix look downright maniacal. I really enjoy this card, and it's a very pivotal card for the set, and I really enjoy it. I know that I split up the Aquapolis video into two parts, but for Skyridge, since there's so many things for me to cover, I think we should make sense for me to split this into three separate parts. I know that sounds kind of annoying, but trust me, it's way easier for me. Plus, I want to do this set full justice.
Ah, look, we've made it. I'm glad that we finally made it to the ancient Sky City. This place really is gorgeous. I love the scenery. And this is the perfect place to end things off with this fantastic set in the E Series. Let me just say, so many of these cards are just so memorable and interesting that it makes me actually want to review every single individual card in the set, and it makes me happy to cover Pokemon cards that have real heart and soul injected into them. Today, I think that I want to start with Toshino Aoki, who worked on 4 cards for Skyridge, starting with the Aerodactyl, which looks to be screaming as it flies through a cave, with some nice deep blue-green water below it, with specks of white. The card is simplistic beauty in my opinion. The Kadabra is also quite nice. I like how, again, it's very simple, but it conveys a curiosity in the Pokemon that I don't feel like we usually see from it. And the rocks changing color with the distance is also quite nice. The Sun Current is very simple, but the water effects as it falls from the top is really top notch. It almost looks like the Sun Current is in the same area as the Sunflora is, which is a nice touch. Finally for Aoki is the Swinub, which just seems to be crawling away as it goes down a path, with some nice mountains and clouds in it with a bright blue sky in the background. Overall, Aoki proves himself to produce some really nice simplistic cards for the TCG, some that we don't typically see, where they're purposeful and intentional with that simple design decision, which I respect. Our next artist is Sumiyoshi Kizuki, one who I'm always delighted to review due to the conflicting and unique style that they have, starting with the Electrode, which seems to be trying to electrocute everything that stands around it, as it conjures up a storm that strikes many lightning bolts onto the ground, with some nice gothic-looking sharp buildings in the background, and rain droplets splattering around the card. The Delibird just appears to be chillin' as it sits on top of a house, as a rainbow forms in the background, and more houses and mountains can be seen in the back. The Eevee seems to be in the same cave as the previous Ditto was in, and we can see a very similar cave painting featuring in this card, which is cool, as these are depicted by two totally different artists, so it's nice to see that a lot of these cards connect with each other. The Mantine swims along the cave as the water is very clear and bubbles float up to the surface, which is very striking, with non-visible outlines of the card. Continuing on with cards that connect, the Shuckle appears to be in the same oasis city that a few of our other cards found themselves in, as it appears to be in a very similar crater city surrounded by water, and it scratches its head with one of its tentacle arm thingies. The Voltorb looks straight angry, dude. Like, the way that he looks up and to the right is just so devious. I like how you can see out of the house and even small bits of the background too. I think it's just neat. The Weedle appears to be in the same city as the previously mentioned Delibird, which is just a very neat touch. Pretty sure I've said this before. When different cards connect into one, it's just such a nice idea that I'd love to see in different cards. And these are no different, as you can clearly tell that Kizuki is just a talented artist who has two distinct styles that they use. It's just so neat to see. Our next artist is the one who is in charge of the Pikachu evolution line, being Yuka Mori with the Raichu, which looks up and to the right. I like the little white outline on this card, and the dark background contrasts nicely with the yellow Raichu. The Dunsparce seems to be crawling along a cliffside, with many deep rocks around it. The Pikachu just holds its arms to the side as it smiles and stands up around some boulders, and foliage is all around it, which is cute, and there are some neat little white dots that surround it. The Piloswine stands next to some destroyed concrete ruins and bricks as the rubble can be seen around it, and I can only assume that Piloswine was the one who caused the damage. Then finally for Mori, the Swinub, which just smiles as it looks forwards, with some nice blurry trees in the background and little rocks below it. Suffice to say, Mori has been proven to be a staple of the TCG since they started back in Neo Discovery, and it's nice to see them get a nice spread of Pokemon for the penultimate set of the WOTC era. Our next artist is one who you probably expect to be much later on the list, with their super wide array of beautiful cards that they've worked on so far. But no, they just keep on going in Skyridge. This being Naoya Kimura, who worked on 6 cards for the set, being the Machamp, which thrusts its arm forwards and extends one of its hands outwards while looking very upset. The Poliwrath, which sits down and looks up, as the moon appears to be split halfway diagonally. And it looks like the shadow of Charizard is in the distance, but I also like the fog around the Pokemon. The Vaporeon bounds out of the water, and it splashes it everywhere around it, which is just gorgeous. I like the colors, because even though Vaporeon is already blue, the water and the sky are very distinct, and you can see all the different colors that they used. The Sandshrew look up as the sun sets above them. You can tell that it's a setting as you can see the shadows slowly creeping down the crater. But it's a cool rendition of Sandshrew. I just like how one of them comes up from a little burrow. It gives it some nice personality. The Slugma goops down from some rocks as it illuminates the area. I like the depth in the cave with the illuminated light. Then finally for Kimura, the Snorlax, which lays in a little bath with some steam rising around it, and some nice mountains in the background. I like the colors in this card quite a bit. For Kimura, it doesn't surprise me that they made a lot of really cool cards for the set, and I'm excited to see more from them. Our next artist is one who I always enjoy talking about, being Yukiko Baba. These cards all show off that signature Baba style, which is something that I'm determining a name still for. But we'll start off with the Kabuto, which grasps onto a rock as it sits in a cave with some nice teal water, and that background is also present. But this one Ammonite is just kind of standing there chilling. The Girafarig is in an oasis city as it tries to eat some grass off the ground from what it seems. Then the Ladybug seems to be in the same area as the previous card, and I like how they're just climbing on leaves. The seal card is also really nice teal water, and I like the sleeping one in the back as well as the little waterfall. Their Slugma is just adorable. I like how there's just one trying to drink some hot steamy water from the crater. I think that's a really cool idea for a card. Then finally for Baba, the Venomoth, which just flies across a nice canyon that has trees and some deep waters. I also like the deep orange sky in the back. Baba's cards are always interesting, and I quite like all of these cards, especially the Slugma. Umamoto's Pokemon cards are always very striking, but they were granted the wonderful idea to illustrate the full Gengar evolution line for Skyridge. But first, I'll talk about Kyoko Umamoto's Flareon, which is really nice. I love how fluffy they made the tail look, and I like the desert hills in the background, as well as the wheat in the foreground. I like how cute and fluffy they made Flareon look in this card. I really like the Zubat that Umamoto did, and I like the little water effects, how they kind of look patterned. Same with the mountains, too.
And also, the moon in the background is quite nice, with the Zubat looking pretty dynamic. The Staryu is really nice. I like how it's floating above the water, and I really like the lines that go inwards towards the middle of the little pond. I just like these multiple circles that Umamoto does. The Ghastly looks back and to the right as some awesome broken and busted ruins are in the foreground, with some hills in the background. I like the Haunter quite a lot. I like when they make Haunter look gaseous and flowy, and I also like the Zapdos statue that's visible in the foreground, along with those same hills from the Ghastly card. Overall, a very nice card for a Pokemon like Haunter. Then we'll talk about the Starmie, which appears to be in a different cave. I like how they use different colors to identify the texture on the rocks as well as on the rocks in the background. The Starmie looks almost kind of long in a way. It's cool though, not the most dynamic looking card for Starmie, but the background makes it awesome. Finally for Umamoto, the Gengar, which appears to be in the same ruins as the other two Pokemon of the evolution line. But in this card, you can see Zapdos and the Articuno statue in the ruins, as Gengar evilly smiles off and to the right of the card. I like the cool blue color that they use for this Gengar card, and I like how scary he looks, but also kind of curious in a way. For Skyridge, Umamoto delivers cards that make you really want them, especially the Gengar and even a simplistic Pokemon like Zubat. Alright, so now we're moving on to the final four artists of Skyridge, and to start off, we'll talk about Hajime Kusajima. In the previous video, I praised them for their beautiful renditions of a Pokemon like Magnemite, but this artist has something special about them in this set as well. First of all, we'll talk about the Articuno, which is a beautiful rendition of the Pokemon, as it flies through some sort of ancient city, as you can see some stairs below it, and the mountains in the back. Then, there's the Mercargo, which just looks forward, but I just like the shading of this Pokemon, and the lava in the background is a nice touch. The Amistar looks up in a compacted cave, and the water below it illuminates the Pokemon above it. The Houndour bounces up and has a very nice shading style that's used on it, with a nice orange-white outline around the Pokemon, with the flowing river in the back. Then, the Starmie, and I like the outline on this one as well. The rocks around it seem to be bending around it, and the spikes are a nice touch, with that bright light illuminating the bottom of the card. And then Kusajima's final regular card was just a Magneton, which looks at its own reflection in a metallic ball, with Pokeballs surrounding the Pokemon. It's interesting to see Magneton with such small magnets. It makes it look interesting and strange. But I like the bright orange sky in the background, and the grass in the foreground. And now, we can talk about a more specific rarity, being Crystal Pokemon. Yep, you heard that right. They brought back crystals once again for Skyridge. But Kusajima worked on one, being the Crystal Ho-Oh, which is really gorgeous. I really love the deep yellow color to the right of it, and the vibrant colors on the actual Pokemon make it seriously stand out. You can also see a crop circle below it, or what it looks to be a crop circle, but I think my favorite part of the card is how its neck bends out below its body, giving you a really interesting view of this Pokemon, where its claws are almost at its head, and it only makes sense that someone like Kusajima was able to do such a beautiful card for a beautiful set. Our next artist is Koki Saito, who illustrated a total of 8 cards for Skyridge. That's a pretty big increase from the previous set's 3. The first card by them is the Dugong, which looks back towards the camera as steam rises in the background. I like the expression on Dugong's face, as it's pretty expressive. The Kabutops in a similar cave to the ones we saw from the Kabuto, but has its sights primed as it jumps into battle. The Magneton faces in all different directions, as the camera looks up onto it, with some kind of city in the background, and a nice sky can also be seen in the card. The Moltres looks back and to the left as it glides through the air. It's kinda hard to tell what else is going on in the card, so I will move on to the Fortress, which travels with a buddy, and they seem to be exploring some caves or a cliffside from the looks of it. The Heracross swipes its claw down. I like seeing the effect of the claw swipe, as well as its very determined face. It's a nice touch. And finally for Saito, they worked on the one and only Crystal Charizard for Skyridge. When I look at this card, I think, wow, this is almost certainly a Charizard card. I mean, the illustration is gorgeous, don't get me wrong, and I like the background that it has as well, with those wings that jump upwards and outwards. But I like seeing other Pokemon that Saito illustrated, which is probably a really weird thing to say. I just think I have major Charizard fatigue from all the new Charizards in the world. An artist who I'm not surprised is so far on the list is Mitsuhiro Rita, and they worked on a grand total of 8 cards for Skyridge. Firstly, we'll talk about the Macargo, which stares off into the distance as it stands on top of a rock. I like the deep sky in the background, and a semi-realistic flame on the Macargo shell. The Nidoqueen can be seen snooping around in the alleyway, and I like the camera angle that showcases the Nidoqueen's horn. The Raikou may be one of my favorite, if not my very favorite card from the whole set. I mean, the pose, the action, the electricity that crackles in the background, and those glass shards that appear in the foreground. I think this card is really a work of art, and I'll probably go a little bit out of my way to find a nice picture of this card. I mean, hey, I even have this card in my own personal collection. Granted, the card is in Japanese, but it's amazing looking either way. The Rhydon is in a really cool pose. It's like mid-action, with a bunch of different kinds of rocks surrounding it. It just makes the card look nice. Enough said. The Pineco floats along a crack in the ground, most likely the result of some earthquake. The Ursaring lays down in hot springs that the Teddiursa from the previous card was checking out, which is just a cute connection of the story, which I really enjoy. Finally, for Arita, the two crystal cards, and we'll start off with the Golem. Really cool to see a Pokemon like Golem get a cool chase card, and the colors on this one are absolutely gorgeous. I really adore that extremely deep red-orange color that was used for the light of the sun, as well as the pose that Golem's in, as it just holds onto one of the dunes that sit right next to it. The sky is just a marvel, and it really stands out. Then, the Crystal Celebi is just gorgeous. I love how Celebi is looking back at the camera as it shoots out whatever it can conjure up, like the vines and roots. And I also really love the red, blue, green, and yellow that can be seen in the background. It makes the card really pop, and makes it feel really special and distinct.
Finally for Skyridge, Atsuko Nishida, who worked on the Polytoad for Skyridge, which looks up and to the right, with some leaves almost covering its head as they droop down, and the Polytoad stands in some kinds of stream, which is kind of neat. The Umbreon poses in front of the moon, as it typically does. I like how the ears can be seen covering the moon as it's looking back at the camera, with the grass around it obstructing parts of the moon. The Xatu, which simply glides through the air. I like how the different colors reflect off of this Pokemon, specifically, like its big forehead. The Misdreavus flies through the air as well, but its hair flows in different directions behind it, and it looks quite cute as it's surrounded by nice bright red light. The Noctowl looks to the right as it covers its body with its own wing, with a dark night sky in the background, and trees surround it. The Persian Prince is through some brownish yellowish grass as it looks to the left, and the sky behind it almost looks pink. I also like the Jigglypuff that Nishida did, with the bright flash in the sun, and the Jigglypuffs just wading through the shallow and bright blue water, with a nice blue sky in the background. It makes them very cute. Nishida worked on two crystal cards for Skyridge, being the Crobat, which flies through the air and looks over to the right, and I really love how Crobat looks in this card. I don't know if it's just the pinkish color that Nishida used for this Pokemon, or just the contrasting colors, but I really do like the actual design that Nishida settled on for the Pokemon in particular. The other crystal card that Nishida did was the Kabutops, which looks very menacing. With the bright shading that Nishida uses, it almost makes the scythe look like they're shimmering and glistening that metallic hue that they emit. I like the slashes of black in the background, as well as the red, almost evil-looking eye of Kabutops. This card is amazing, and I also adore how its arms are crossed over each other. It just makes the Pokemon look straight cool. For an artist who I'm used to seeing cutesy cards of, Nishida proves themselves to be a pretty talented artist just in general. Now, we can quickly talk about all of the holo cards in this set. This set did the same thing that Aquapolis did, but this time I think I'm just going to name off all the cards and all the holos, instead of reading off every single individual artist along with it. So, first we have H1, Alakazam, Arcanine, Articuno, Beedrill, Crobat, Dugong, Flareon, Fortress, Gengar, Gyarados, Houndoom, Jolteon, Kabutops, Ledian, Machamp, Magcargo, and Magcargo again, Magneton, Magneton again, Moltres, Nidoqueen, Piloswine, Politoed, Poliwrath, Raichu, Raikou, Rhydon, Starmie, Steelix, Umbreon, Vaporeon, and Xatu. These holos that they chose for the set are all really good, and there really isn't a single one that I actually dislike. Wow, I think that wraps up Skyridge. Thankfully for me, I separated this into 3 parts, because all of this in one video would make it longer than my Neo Destiny video for sure, which is currently the longest video on the channel. And, geez, there are so many cards to love in Skyridge. I mean, it is the penultimate WOTC set for a reason, as well as their final one, but there are so many desirable cards in this set that any collector would want, even if you're just going to get some of the common or uncommon cards. My personal favorite cards are the Crystal Crobat, Crystal Golem, Crystal Ho-Oh, Crystal Celebi, Steelix, Raikou, Slugma, Staryu, Poliwrath, Vaporeon, Jolteon,
Haunter, Arcanine, Snubbull, and the Umbreon. There are so many cards that you could love from the set, and I just chose some of the ones that stand out to me the most. I encourage you to look in your own time and figure out what your own favorite card from Skyridge is. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.